Teachers of Reddit, what clicked about a pupil after meeting their parents? Obligatory, not a teacher, but I work at a psychiatric hospital for children and teens. I work directly with the kids, so I don't get to meet parents often. We had a super sweet little girl on my unit once. They said it was because she assaulted her little 3-year-old sister. But the whole thing just didn't make sense. I can read kids well, and usually the ones that are violent and dangerous to family have a certain attitude. She just didn't. She was meek, respectful, and just overall the easiest patient I'd ever had. When visitation came, her parents showed up and it all started to make sense. They would just berate her for everything. Here is this little 9-year-old girl and her mom is telling her she's faked up. Why can't she be normal, etc. And this kid just took it. Not for long though, because I'm allowed to remove the child at my discretion if I think it will make it worse for her, and so I did, and promptly called CPS. It turns out that all the abuse she was doing to her sister was just the mother abusing both of them and then blaming it on the little girl. You will all be happy to know that she was moved in with her grandparents in a different state and is thriving and happy. Edit. Thank you for the gold you're leaded #2. There are ways to volunteer your time helping children by becoming an advocate. The state always needs them, and you get to do good. If you are moved to do so, here is the link for the National Child Advocacy in the US. This is from back when I was doing my student teaching. There was a girl in one of my classes that never did any work in class, turned in her homework late, and would ignore huge projects until literally the last minute, and then ask to come in for help every day at lunch/after school to make up for the missing work. Eventually I caught her cheating on a quiz. She had written down the answers, put them in the plastic cover of her binder, and put her binder down by her feet. I took her quiz, gave her a 0, and told her that cheating wasn't allowed. About a week later, we had parent-teacher conferences. The girl came with her mother, who took out every assignment that had been graded and handed back, and proceeded to argue with me over individual points. Things along the lines of, well, she spelled it all right, so that deserves some credit, right? Or she circled the right answer, so she should still get some credit. When that right answer had been crossed off, and then another answer had been selected. This took nearly an hour to go through. Finally, the mother brought up the quiz, and I told her about the cheating. The mom said, well, you should give her some credit on it. She was pretty clever to think of that trick. From then on, I made sure to schedule meetings with myself, my mentor teacher, and the principal present. I was that kid. Father worked shifts, and when he was home he was doing backyard car repairs to help make ends meet. Not because he didn't earn a good living, he actually did. But because my mother was a gambling addict. Instead of addressing the problem, he focused on solving the symptoms. I went to school from an unheated house with a mother still in bed, and no breakfast in freezing weather with no coat, because she spent the money on gambling. Went 4 years without medical treatments for the same reason. No toothpaste, no hair conditioner, no haircuts, old shoes, socks, and underwear with holes, all because anything she could make us do without went to gambling. Hair was done in the frigid school gym in bare feet and a t-shirt, because gym shoes and sweatshirts cost money that could be used to make bets instead. One day the vice principal called me to her office, not to reprimand me, but to give me the optional pieces of uniform I didn't have, like a coat and a school blazer. They were the options without which you froze half to death as you walked or biked several miles to school. She didn't make a big deal out of it, she simply met a need. Her act of kindness lit a spark in me. To this day, almost 40 years later, I still put money, time and hard work into caring for others and charity work. I'm the mom who will volunteer at school, quietly contribute anything the teachers are short of, that person. Not for recognition or thanks. In fact, I'm embarrassed if you do that. It's because nearly 40 years ago someone cared. Not a teacher but a student. In kindergarten we had this kid who was really odd and smelled funny, but he seemed cool, so we would hang out at recess. I had a birthday party, and it was only supposed to last maybe a few hours. All of the kids but him went home fairly early, but it was really late and his parents still hadn't showed up. I was getting tired and wanted to go to bed, so my parents set up some blankets for us in the living room, and we had a sleepover. At 2 a.m. his parents finally show up, after multiple calls with no answer. Instantly I realized what was up. Even as a small child I knew these parents were the definition of white trash. They reeked of alcohol. My mom's side of the family is full of alcoholics, so I knew what it smelled like. They also told some bullshit story about how they had new tires of their car and the speedometer showed the wrong speed, and they got pulled over, and some other bullshit. It all clicked, why he acted so odd, and why he smelled. It was cigarette smoke. At the start of first grade he never showed up, and like a month into the year he was there for a few days. Then randomly in third grade he showed back up again for a few weeks. I never saw him again after that. I looked him up on Facebook a while back, and it looks like he is following in his parents' footsteps up falling into every white trash stereotype. I asked my parents about this kid a while ago, and they said that the reason he wasn't with us in school for a few years is that he got taken away by Child Protective Services, which my mom called. Then he came back the W times, because that's when his parents got him back, but he was taken away again and that's why he left us. I feel bad for the kid, because at first he was really nice, but over time as I saw him again he became more mean and rude. Such shitty parents. I'm the kid. When I was growing up, I'd get pulled aside and asked if I smoked. I'm talking elementary school. My parents, much like someone else had mentioned, smoked in the house with the windows closed. I was heavy, really heavy, with a lot of confidence issues that still stick around today. I had problems with anger growing up, not so much now, but I was an excellent student when you could inspire me to focus or found something I was passionate about. They'd meet my parents and nod to me. My dad, who would work swing and overtime every day, almost to support my mom's 2 to 3 pack a day habit at the time. Now it's only 1 pack, supposedly. My mom, who basically looked strung out on drugs, but was really just taking so many antipsychotics and pain meds that she might as well have been. My parents tried to be supportive of me, but I'm not sure they really knew how. I'd keep a bottle of Febreze on me starting in middle school because the questioning from teachers got worse. I'm graduating college in June, even though it's taken me twice as long as it should, mostly because of money, a lack of guidance, and my own mental BS. I got a job working in student government for the first time ever and was sent to a conference in Washington, D.C. by my college last year. I worked my first non-minimum wage job this summer and got invited to come back with another raise. To my 4th and 5th grade teacher, if you're reading this, I'm okay. I did it, and I hope your ladybug collection has grown. Edit. Holy moly, RIP my inbox, and thank you to the lovely stranger with gifting my first gold. Thank you so much for all of the lovely comments. I'm trying not to cry on the train to my vacation. It means the world to me. These children, there were 3 of them, were known for being difficult at the after-school care I worked in. I had always heard bad things about Dad, but not until I actually experienced it firsthand did I make the connection between his parenting and his kids' behavior. The eldest, 5th grade, would refuse to listen to us. He would often kick other children, provoke them by grabbing them and pulling them in close, or just act out in a way that was verbally abusive. When we asked him to stop, he would respond with "screw you." The middle, 3rd grade, struggled to pay attention for more than 5 minutes and often picked on other kids by intentionally stirring them up and spreading rumors. The youngest, kindergarten, was 6 but still not entirely toilet trained and had to repeat kindergarten because she wasn't at normal developmental or social levels. One afternoon, the eldest is in a pretty good mood. Because I'm curious, I ask, and he announces proudly, "Dad is picking me up early at 4 p.m. because we are going to see a movie this afternoon." This is awesome, because the 3 kids are always last to be picked up. But 4 p.m. comes and goes, and there's no sign of Dad. 4:30 p.m., 5 p.m., 6 p.m., 6:30 p.m. It's closing time. We get a call from Dad. "I'm sorry, I got caught up. It's almost 7 p.m. before Dad arrives." As the kids grab their bags, he tries to explain to me, but he's sort of all over the place. Some actual quotes from our conversation: "Don't tell the kids, but I'm so gone right now. I stayed back with some mates and had some drinks. Investment banking is stressful, so you look forward to Friday. So, you'd be, what, 20 now? What's a young pretty thing like you doing working so late on a Friday night? He offers to slip some cash to me and my co-worker for the extra time. My mate is driving us home. I only trust some of my mates with the new Porsche. The nail in the coffin was when eldest asked dad, "I thought you said we were going to see that movie tonight." To which he replies simply, "Oh, yeah, sorry mate, I forgot." And in that moment, I realized that these kids were being told over and over and over, "You don't really matter that much to me." Edit. About 2 months after this happened, the kids packed up and left the school with about a week's notice. Although they told us how much they hated us regularly, I hadn't ever seen them all as quiet as in that last week. We haven't seen them since. Edit. Formatting. Had a kid that you looked at and it was very much a lights are on but nobody is home sort of feeling. I teach high school so sometimes that's just the phase they are in, but this one was basically living perpetually in that mode. Kid has an IEP, individualized educational plan, which is a legal special education doc. I can't reveal what was in there but it was, suffice to say, generic. So it feels like there are pieces missing. Days go on, this kid is the gold standard of something is up, completely illegible handwriting to the point it doesn't resemble writing. You ask about what we are doing in class and the answer is so random and off task that if the kid didn't look and act fairly childlike for their age you would assume hardcore drug use, but this kid, if anything, had Ralph Wiggum genes and didn't know what drugs were. Mom comes back to school night which is supposed to be 5 minutes with a class of parents. A nice how do you do and everyone moves on. She corners me, immediately starts telling me about her concerns, that I don't fully appreciate her miracle baby who was mute until 8, didn't walk until 4, walked backwards first, and had an IQ of about 60. They told her this kid would never make it in school, and didn't I think you just couldn't tell anything was ever delayed, because this is a miracle. That's why she blocked all mention of those conditions from the documents. Because people would never guess otherwise. Miracle. When the word miracle comes up from a parent it always explains a lot. 0.0. Not yet a teacher, but studying to be one in one of my major field experiences. There was a kid who was insanely competitive. He would take everything as a challenge and would accuse others of cheating if he lost. He even challenged me, a 19-year-old student at the time, to a race. I told him it really wouldn't be fair, since I was fully grown, and he started berating me that I was scared to race him. Mind you, he was 9 at the time. So the end of the year is coming around, and we had a field day where parents volunteered to do games for the kids, and it was supposed to be a fun day full of popsicles and school games. His parents had a relay race, spin around the bat, jump rope a certain distance, etc. And when it was his turn they encouraged him to cheat by not following their rules, and got upset because some poor girl dropped the bat, obviously meaning she would be disqualified. They also brought a tug-of-war rope, and it was the girls of the class vs the boys. The girls being outnumbered, my field experience teacher put me on their team. I decided I wouldn't tug, so that it was a bit more fair, but once again the students' parents started getting red-faced telling him to win. I looked at my field experience teacher and she just nodded and I pulled. Kid got knocked down a peg. Why he was fluent in English, Spanish and German. I was teaching a grade 3 class that year, if I remember correctly, and I had the pleasure of teaching this wonderful polite young man named Mark. Mark was a delight to teach, very cheerful, picked things up quickly, got on well with the other kids. One day, we did a project on what makes me unique and Mark was having some trouble explaining what he wanted to write. He said, well, in German it would be, but in Spanish it could be, but I don't know how to write it in English. I asked him how he knew those languages, and he shrugged and said he thought most kids probably could, and that's all I could get out of him. Obviously I was curious, but I didn't want to pry too far and make him feel self-conscious about it, so I just helped him with his project and waited patiently for parent-teacher interviews. Both of Mark's parents showed up to the interview, and it was clear almost immediately why he was fluent in those languages. His mother and father were lovely people, but they had the annoying habit of switching language every few words when discussing with each other, before returning me a sentence in English. I asked them how they were so fluent, and it turns out that they had moved a lot because of the father's job, and the mother's career was very flexible, internet-based income I think. So that sorted that right out. Mystery solved. Except that although he spoke English, Spanish and German, both his parents were Chinese. First year of working at my current job, not a teacher, but I do work with children on a daily basis, and I overhear this conversation between a group of 4th grade girls. Girl 1, what do you want to be when you grow up? Girl 2, I don't know, I really like dancing and stuff. Girl 3, I'm not sure either, what about you? Girl 1, I'm gonna get pregnant and get food stamps and welfare. I really wish I was embellishing this story. I wish to God that I was making all, or at least part of this up. When my coworker heard this, she about lost it. Well, we knew what mom was like, so it was no surprise. Unmarried, 4 kids at the time, and looked like she was no older than about 23. They were known amongst the staff for being in poverty, as the girls, yes, all her children were girls, frequently came in wearing the same/dirty clothes, bills going unpaid, etc. We tried incredibly hard to change this. Numerous times when we had events we set aside something specifically for this family. When my partner at work heard this, she went ballistic. She contacted the university in my town and set up a field trip with numerous guest speakers from the dance team, cheerleading team, sports teams, and a few other groups, to show the kids what all they could get to do from going to college. The kids really seemed to enjoy it, especially those girls, and all they talked about the rest of the day was how cool those people were. I was an elementary teacher's aide for several years in college. We were having a parent-teacher conference with a struggling 5th grader and his parents. The poor kid was bright, but somewhat lazy, and reading at barely a 1st grade level. The teacher laid out what we've been working on with the student individually for the last few months, to try to improve his reading, and get him engaged in learning. The teacher then gently suggested that the kid should be practicing his reading at home with an adult. I suggested that, since the kid loved Pokemon, there were some juvenile novelizations of Pokemon stories at the local bookstore that he may enjoy, and that it would help interest and engage him in improving his reading comprehension. I'll never forget the withering look the father gave me. We don't have extra money lying around to buy something that he can do at school. I was 19 at the time and shaky around confrontation, so I lowered my gaze and shut my mouth. The teacher reassured the parents that we were doing everything in our power to help their child, and that we would continue helping their son improve his reading. That was that. A few days after this, the students were taking turns at the end of the day telling us something good that happened to them that week, a ritual that I really admire, that the teacher started. The kids loved it. When it was the struggling student's turn, he stood up and got an empty video game case and controller out of his bag and said, "This week, my dad bought the new PlayStation and lots of new games, and we've been staying up late every night playing." I almost cried in frustration and pity. Please understand, I have absolutely nothing against kids playing video games, but it has to be in moderation. His faking parents sat there and told us that they had no extra money to help their kid not only get better at learning, but actually enjoy doing it with something he loved, like a goddamn $4.99 book about Pokemon. But then they turn around and spend hundreds of dollars on a new PlayStation and games. Maybe buy your kid a book about video games as whole. So frustrating. I was a daycare teacher while going to college. I had one kid who was a total faking nightmare, Andrew. He was only a toddler, but imagine the terrible twas, and then increase them by 10x. Kids at that age are still learning proper behavior, but the rest of my kids understood basic manners. Andrew was a hurricane in human form. If there was a fight, Andrew was in the middle of it. He was the kid who'd start screaming in the middle of quiet time just to cause chaos. Wouldn't do what he was told, wouldn't listen to anybody, wouldn't keep his hands to himself. Every teacher in the place constantly wanted to strangle him, self included. Andrew was the only kid known by name to the entire teaching staff even at the elementary school level. People would be like, "There goes Andrew's teacher, I just need her name, poor girl." He was that kid. Then I met his mom. I'm positive she was married, but I never saw Andrew's dad. Never even met him. The guy didn't seem involved in his son's life at all. The mom was a nervous wreck and talked to Andrew like he was a doll with a fatal disease who was going to die any day, not a real person with feelings of his own or who needed to learn a little self-autonomy. She insisted on doing everything for him as if he were completely incapable. At that point I realized I had to start praising the shit out of this kid because he certainly wasn't getting any direction or positive attention at home. So I wait for my opportunity. It took a few days simply because Andrew was such a holy terror. But then suddenly, I'll never forget that fateful Tuesday. The kids are sitting at the lunch table waiting to wash their hands for lunch. I have to pick the first kid, and Andrew happens to be quietly sitting there with his hands folded while the other kids are jumping around in their seats. It was a true miracle. I'm sure somewhere nearby, people were reporting sightings of the Virgin Mary and the rivers running red. Andrew, I exclaimed. Andrew's sitting so nicely, I think he gets to wash his hands first today. Andrew looked scared when I called his name because he figured he was in trouble again. Then he figured out what was going on. The kid got out of his seat and approached me looking dazed, like he'd been unexpectedly called up to accept an Emmy. The other kids immediately went dead quiet because they wanted to be picked after Andrew. In that moment, Andrew became the star of the age-2 classroom. The other kids even started including him in their games. This started a feedback loop. Andrew behaved better, so he got more praise. Then he behaved even more. I'd reward Andrew by letting him hold the storybook for me during story time or helping me with other things. Pretty soon he became like my personal assistant because I'd turn around and he was just there waiting to help me with something. That kid loved helping. It was incredible. Overnight, he became like a well-mannered Clark Kent. I think Andrew finally developed a sense of pride, something his anxious mom never allowed him. He wanted to wash his own hands, try the toilet by himself, and open doors, which he couldn't quite reach, but he improvised with a chair a few times, until I caught him. A few weeks into this, I saw his mom at the school. She was trying to tie Andrew's shoes but he insisted, "No, I can do it." And he did. The look on her face was hilarious. It's like she finally realized he was a real person. I had to leave that job to go back to school a few months later. I was surprised to discover that telling Andrew was the hardest of all my kids because I'd come to like him the most. By that point, he'd started calling me mommy, and while he stopped after I corrected him, it was clear he still designated me with that role in his mind. When I said I was leaving, he kept asking why and didn't understand. That was hard. I stopped by the school a year later to say hi to my old colleagues, and who do I happen to see but a few of my kids. They'd all grown so much in just a year's time, but I recognized them instantly. The kids saw me, but quickly lost interest. I was just some lady to them now, except for Andrew. He said nothing, but his eyes never left me. I wonder where he is now. In my first year of teaching high school, I was at an affluent high school, one of the best in the state. I taught honors and app students in tandem with another teacher, page area setup. She taught the applet. I taught the history course paired with. The school did not then pair two app courses for page area. I had a student, let's call him Timmy. He was a typical bright, but lazy 15-year-old white kid from an upper middle class family. He always had the latest phone. He could afford both pot and hard drugs. He got the 5-year-old hand-me-down BMW when he turned 16, and he had the entitled attitude to go with it. Normally, the Timmys of my school got B+s and As, just enough to get into the colleges they wanted, not so much that they actually had to work. Timmy, on the other hand, did nothing. Literally. If an assignment didn't happen in class, he didn't do it. If it did happen in class, he would hand in an empty page, and if you required him to do something, he would either abacadabra the multiple choice, or just put C for everything, or write one-word responses in short answer and essay sections. At first, I was sympathetic. I figured he was going through a divorce at home, or an undiagnosed dyslexic, or something. Discussed it with my co-teacher, but she just said, "No, that's just to me." I discussed it with the counselor, same result. It was really driving me nuts. This kid could easily go to college. There's a real chance he's on Reddit now, and he was torpedoing all of it. And worse, if he was known to be so useless, why did they let him into an app class in the first place? Our kids were bright, driven, and passionate, the sort of kids who came in crying when they missed a homework assignment, not the sort whose response to any question was, "Whatever, man." I documented everything. Sent letters home, offered him extra credit, tried any way I could to talk to him, made it very clear that I would fail him. And his response was still just, "Whatever, man." At the end of the semester, his grade was a 17. For non-Americans, bright, hardworking kids get a 93 to 98. Still bright but not as hardworking, and hardworking but not as bright kids get 85, 93. Hardworking but not bright get 77, 85. Anywhere below 77 is either a learning disability, a behavioral problem, or a poor fit to a class. The absolute basement is normally around 60. 17 is so low as to be unheard of. So, in due course, I failed him. As expected, I immediately heard back from the parents, who had been impossible to contact all semester. Turns out, she was a neurologist at one of the local university hospitals. He was high up in the state's attorney's office. They both came in, with earnest, sincere, good white Americans expressions and voices, talking about how he's a good boy, surely we can work something out, etc. I said no. The time for that had been any of the 8 different documented occasions during the semester that I had tried to contact them. At this point, it was unfair to the other students to let him pass. Of course, they didn't like that at all. So they went to the principal, we all sat down, and had a very long meeting, and the outcome was I gave him a test. His grade 4, that test was his grade for the semester. To me wasn't stupid, so of course he got a 94. And that was his grade, despite doing zero work. After that, someone finally bothered to tell me that he had been doing just that for years, and his parents were such amazing pains in the ass that he had been getting away with it. I quit teaching after that. He should be about .27 now, and is probably a horrible human being somewhere. I wasn't the teacher. I was the kid. Growing up, my siblings and I'm the youngest of 4, adapted to a very dysfunctional lifestyle. My father was an abusive alcoholic that worked 80+ hours a week to support us on a farmer's salary, and my mother was depressed and had no ambition to do anything. I'm talking sleep all day, not cook us food, not take care of herself, go out in public wearing her ratty moo-moo and slippers with her hair all unkempt. My parents weren't equipped for children, but alas, they had 4 of us. Needless to say, my siblings and I raised ourselves. We grew up on cereal and microwaved meals, and witnessed my father beat our mother and threaten to kill her with his gun countless times during his drunken rants. Although that was normal for us, it certainly had its lingering effects. Teachers always noticed how mature I was at such a young age, but couldn't understand why I was always so anxious and seemed to be worried all the time. Many times I was told that I had wisdom beyond my years because I was able to look at a person and easily tell what was going on inside their head. My empathy for people was well developed, but I wasn't able to convey to anyone that I never felt safe. I was always on guard, and because of that, I had terrible anxiety. This led to me constantly chewing my fingers to a bloody mess, picking my lips, covering my ears during loud noises, and always being hyper aware of my surroundings. I never felt at peace. I was brought to guidance counselors many times where I talked to them about things that worried me, but it was always on a shallow level. I never talked about how daddy points his gun at mommy, and how mommy doesn't feed us. Instead, my siblings and I banded together and supported each other ourselves. We all left home early. My 2 brothers left as soon as they graduated high school and joined the military. My sister left at 15 to live with a boyfriend's family, and I left at 14 to live with a friend's family. I thrived there. I became the child I couldn't be before. Dad left my mom and quit drinking. He's become a rock for our family and has built love and trust with everyone. Seriously, he's a great man, but did some terrible things when he was younger. My mom, well, she's still the same. Depressed. Doesn't work. Lives with her brother and sister. Constantly comes to my siblings and I for help, and we give into it because it's just easier to give in than to fight and have to listen to you kids don't understand. I feel like I'm left behind and pushed to the side kind of rant. My siblings and I are still really close. We all have decent jobs, live in our own, raise and support our families. As for me, well, I struggle. Anxiety and depression are a beach. But I try to see the bright side of things. I just don't want to end up like her. I realize this is sort of off topic. Sorry, I guess I just needed to write this out. This one broke my heart, and it's something I still think about from time to time. Just a few months into my first year, several 5th grade students were sent home for lice. One was a small blonde girl named Jean who was fairly quiet and shy. Her clothes were always somewhat unkempt and had a strong cigarette smoke odor. She very rarely completed her homework and hated answering questions in class. However, she was kind, attentive, and performed well on her in-class assignments. We had another round of head checking about a week after the first one and found that Jane still had lice/caught lice again. She was sent home with a call to the parents letting them know. The next day she walked into the classroom with a shaved head. Her parents shaved her hair off so that they did not have to deal with the lice again. She cried when I asked her about it. I felt horrible for her. 5th grade is a tough place to be when you have something that is obviously different about you that other kids can pick on. I could not grow her hair back for her, but I did buy her a cute hat that I allowed her wear in my class if she wanted. It seemed to help. When I met her parents shortly after, they showed up with 3 younger kids that looked about a year apart with the same shaved haircut as Jane. The parents smelled like cigarette smoke and pet urine odor, and I could hear them cursing at their kids in the hallway before I even saw them. Not a teacher, but the story is relevant. Lengthy, but true. I worked for several years as a case manager for adults with mental illness, which put me in their homes on the daily. The one case that haunts me still is the family with 3 semi-functional family members: mom, son, daughter. The daughter's small, 1 to 2 year old child, and the son's live-in friend. The mother and son were both our clients, with various and sundry diagnoses. To say the house was filthy is not giving due diligence to the facility of the English language, but I suppose, for this narrative, it will suffice. At one point they somehow procured a little yappy dog who proceeded to pup everywhere. It got so bad we wouldn't go in the house, just meet with them on the porch, as no one ever seemed to clean anything. At all. Ever. Enter CPS. They left the child in the home with the family of mentally ill folks, dog pup everywhere, and the gods of filth alone know what horrors. Their rationale was, a child needs to be with family. A short time later, a neighbor called the ASPCA, and they came and took the dog, declaring the home unfit for the pet. I have no idea what became of the child as I eventually changed jobs and lost contact with those involved, but occasionally when people bring up work war stories, this is my go-to tell. TLDR, social services is a crapshoot sometimes. Not a teacher, but spent some years in the Coast Guard. Had a kid report in that would have need several more levels of cognitive ability to be merely stupid. We will call him Factored. Factored, despite having been to machinery technician A school, didn't know the difference between oil and coolant. Factored couldn't understand the concept of buoyancy so much, so he couldn't understand how a steel ship could float. Our chief in the galley tried to show him using various bowls and cups. Big mistake, huge. Factored learned from this not buoyancy and displacement, but that despite having been on the ship for 3 months, this is when he learned it could sink. Yep, kid thought Coast Guard boats couldn't sink. That's why he had joined the Coast Guard. His recruiter showed him pictures of Navy boats sunk in Pearl Harbor. He never got qualified to do anything. He got wrote up multiple times for everything from mass to rebating on watch in the engine room, to not showering for weeks, to his uniform looking like clothes a homeless hobo wouldn't be caught dead in. Well, we got to meet the parents, who had brought Factored's uncle's ashes to be buried at sea. He had served in Vietnam. Commanding officer and our chief are talking to his parents and assuring them that the burial will be no issue and we can video it if they like. So there we are, me, Maiko, and Chief with Factored talking to his parents. Chief goes, what happened to uncle of Factored? Well, couple years back Factored and the uncle had insulated uncle of Factored's attic. Old cabin out in some woods. Well, times were hard. Logging had really tapered off. So the uncle and Factored had just used pine needles. So dad says, and the fire department thinks that the pine needles ignited some sort spontaneous way and he died in the fire. Well, that explains it. Gene pool was empty. I was a teacher's aide in an after-school care program in an elementary school. It's where the kids come after the school day ends so they can be cared for until their parents get off work. There was one boy who was a total bully/attention hound. He was stocky and tall and strong for his age, 9 at the time, and a lot of the other kids were scared of him because he demanded that they play with him and then threatened to break things if they didn't do what he wanted. He was totally disrespectful of any adult authority, just a general terror. I disliked him. He was dropped off in the morning by one babysitter and picked up by another at the latest possible time. I never saw a parent. His mother was a news reporter for the Denver Post, like a lady about town who covered the society pages and did reviews of things. Friday afternoon this kid was being super good. He spent all afternoon drawing things for his mom and saying my mom is coming to get me tonight. Not my babysitters. She has the whole weekend off and we are going to do things together, just her and me. Here's the list of all the things. Things like watch a movie, go for a walk, eat dinner together, etc. Pickup time arrived, and here comes the mom, yapping away on her cell phone. Back when having a cell phones was very unusual, signing her kid out without speaking to anyone. Her son is standing there holding his pictures to show her, so excited. She shushed him and brushed off his hand, and her conversation was, oh yeah, I can go review that new spa in Aspen. I'm not doing anything this weekend. Let me just drop kid's name at the babysitter for the weekend. Blah blah. The kid visibly crumpled in on himself. He was silently crying as his mom yanked him out the door while she yapped on her phone, not even as much as a hi honey to her son. I did my best to be very understanding, caring, and attentive to the kid after that, asking him how his day went, praising him when he behaved well. I wish I knew what became of him. I left to go to college, but I know, whenever I saw his mom's byline in the paper I wanted to kick her in the head. She died recently, and I was like, good. I may be a horrible person, but that kid was simply a chihuahua in a handbag to her. Her obituary said she was especially devoted to her son, and I wanted to puke. All I could see was that little boy, with his drawings in his hands, brushed aside by his mother, collapsing in on himself. I hope he's okay now. I have something eating at me while reading this. I came from an abusive household, verbal and on occasion physical. I was quite a meek student, but I made good grades and was never a problem in class for the most part. I did act out in my English class once after a particularly rough night at home, but it was surprisingly my science teacher who confronted me about it. The incident. Math and science were my favorite classes. This man nearly broke me. I could handle all sorts of yelling and foul words by that age, 11, but that's far from what happened. He looked so sad as he gave me this seemingly never-ending "I'm disappointed in you" speech. I bawled my eyes out. I had never been treated so kindly and didn't think I deserved it. I wasn't prone to crying easily either. I had pride in the fact that no matter what my parents did, I'd never let them see tears stain my face. It was the moment that changed everything about how I thought or dealt with things. I trusted him and felt like I needed to, and maybe then I would get the help that I needed. I found his number in the phone book and called him one day after school. Unfortunately, by the time he picked up I lost my nerve to reach out to him. I hung up. I felt like he knew it was me who called and that I somehow spooked him by doing such a thing. He never met my parents. None of my teachers did except one. Even then it was my father who had a much better grip on his temper than my mother. I always felt guilty about this, like it would be my fault from then on if he never reached out to any other kids in need. I always carry a feeling around that I owe him an apology for disappointing him, for acting out in class, for call his house, for not being brave enough to trust him with the help I needed. I wish he knew how much my life/attitude towards my situation that day. I no longer wish I hadn't been born. I started to see that there was light at the end of the tunnel, and that my situation wasn't permanent, that one day, when I was old enough I could break free. I did just that, and started seeing a therapist when I got to college. I still have a hard time opening up and expressing my feelings, but I have gotten better over the years. Thank you to all the teachers who see the little things and get kids the help they need. They may not say it, but it means the world to them that you gave them so much to hope for. I'm a student teacher at a school where over 90% of the students are at risk. My mentor teacher and I were noticing one student was falling asleep consistently every day regardless of the activity we were doing. My mentor's teacher asked him to step into the hall to talk about what's going on, and she found out that he wasn't getting any sleep at his foster home because there were 4 children under 3 in the home, and he shared a room with a baby with colic. Then we found out that he had been wrongfully removed from the free and reduced lunch program and had been starving all week long. The poor kid had no energy at all. When we called the foster parents they said the exact same thing, and it turns out they had taken him in because the only other place that had an opening was a group home for severely disturbed or children with extreme behavioral issues. Administrators are looking into why he was removed, and now he's got his own secret cabinet in the class full of snacks he can come get at any time. He is also allowed to come in during our off period to work on homework or take a quick nap. He is a wonderful student and an awesome kid, and it is awful that he has to go through that. It's really a testament to how awesome my mentor teacher and what a difference a teacher can make in the lives of a student. Please adopt older children. They need homes too, and the system seems to give up once they hit a certain age. First time meeting the parents as they didn't show up to meet and greet or open house. Their kid is struggling in everything, and the parents are near impossible to get a hold of. Kid is violent towards other students and requires non-stop attention from me. Parents deny everything. That is not their student. They don't act like this at home. We put him in judo lessons to exercise his energy. He continues to be a pest in my class and actually causes a student to beg their parents to leave the school. He continually would approach the student and say how he was stupid, dumb, gay, smelled. The student lasted 4 days in my classroom. Despite all my attempts at making sure they were never close to each other, the student would find a way when lining up in specials classes out during recess to torture the other student. Remember the parents talking about judo classes? Funny thing is the next week he uses a judo hold on another student in the playground and almost chokes him out. Cut to the meeting in the admin office with his parents, his therapist, which no one knew he had until the choking incident, me, principal and vice principal. He is given a stay-at-home suspension and will be monitored when he returns to school. Parents still deny everything, and then I bring up judo classes. I explained how he had the student in the chokehold. They didn't say anything. Then it was our fault. We weren't doing enough for him. We don't have enough services. Our school isn't for everyone. We aren't public, so we aren't afforded all the resources and employees. We don't like him. I had a day off the following week. I come back from my day away, and he was pulled out of the school. The kid was a kid, 6 years old. He had glimpses of happiness and could apply himself when he wanted to, but he will keep being enabled by his parents to be as violent and hurtful to others as he wants cause he can. My first year teaching, I had a 7th grade girl that would try to flirt with me and one day actually propositioned to have sex with me. I'll let her know that was incredibly inappropriate, explained the age difference and student/teacher relationship boundary I wouldn't cross, etc etc etc. After talking with the principal, I learned that her dad left the family years ago and was completely out of the picture. This, combined with / caused her to have really low self-esteem, and she frequently responded this way to males that were nice to her and paid attention to her. The principal and I wanted to have a meeting with her and her mother, but it turned out her mom was out of town, so I set out to speak to her older sister, a freshman in college, when she come to pick her up. Within 5 minutes of meeting the sister, she started flirting with me and asked me out, saying I would love to take care of you since you have been so nice to my sister. As with her younger sister, I informed her that I wasn't interested and asked to have her mom call me as soon as she could. About a week later, her mom came into my classroom to speak with me, and within 5 minutes she starts hitting on me, licking her lips suggestively, putting her hand on my shoulder, and trying to rub my leg. She then says we don't really have to involve the principal in this, do we? Maybe you and I could just go out for some drink and make this whole thing go away. I also let her know that I was not interested and that we really need to talk this over with the principal and the guidance counselor. I'm not exactly what you would call a looker. I'm a perfectly average looking guy and have never had this type of attention, but did have a girlfriend, who is now my wife, at the time. It was just amazing to see this entire family of females. We were so lonely and in need of positive male attention they would flirt with any guy who was nice to them. Student here. So basically I didn't have an easy life. I was the unwanted child of my entire family. My external family made this very clear to me when I was younger. They had given my mother the advice to abort me or put me up for adoption. My mom said no, thus tada, I'm here 20 years later. Because I was born, however, the rest of my family turned their backs to our little branch of the family up until I was 5. My mom, being the strong lady that she is, worked 2 jobs and provided a roof over our heads and food in our tummies. So a few years later, the school figured out that I was a smartass and moved me up a few grades and gave me accelerated classes. I didn't really care much for them at the time. This made my mom happy, so who was I to take that happiness away from her? Anyway, come 6th grade, and I had been working hard to get into a gifted program that the district provide. Problem is that it required a lot of money, but they offered me a scholarship so long as my grades were at the top of my year. I had a shitty history teacher who reprimanded me after asking a question on an assignment and told 10-year-old me, yeah, you'll never get into the program with these grades, and dropped my grade from an A to a B. I now know that he couldn't do that, but at the time I didn't know. So I'm now shitting bricks not knowing how it'll affect all the hard work I've put in. My external family comes into the picture and tries to buy my love through gifts that I didn't like, toys that I didn't want, and other trinkets. Finally my aunt offers to pay the tuition of the program. This, however, was a double-edged sword, given that it gave her the right to loom it over my mother. My mother, however, was desperate and was willing to accept it. I told her not to, and that it would be okay if I didn't get it. I asked my history teacher if I could do extra credit or something. He said no, because it was my fault for being a bad student. He even went as far as to say I was a bad kid for not being able to understand the assignment. I had finally reached my limit and worked my little 10-year-old butt to get a better grades and show them all funny 10-year-old mentality. A few months later I got a letter saying my entire tuition was covered and I had been accepted. I took the letter to school that day and showed it to my history teacher and told him you were wrong and left. My mom showed it to my aunt and got to gloat a little. So to my family at that time, who thankfully somewhat changed for the better, and that shitty history teacher, here I'm a full-time college student. I have a full-time job since freshman year. I'm graduating next year in the top 5% of my year and have been offered positions at high-end companies. To all of you, I have to say, you were wrong about me. Not a teacher, and not necessarily exactly what this topic is asking, but I'll throw it in anyway, because it's kind of there. I coached a lot of youth flag football for volunteer hours in high school, and continued in college. Anyway, I had one kid who was in an orphanage and all the parents and teachers basically told me to watch out for. Like, oh, let us know if he does anything. We've already warned him to not do anything at practice. The other kids know to tell us. And there were a few times where he'd have to miss practice or games because of something he did at school. But while he did your normal kid stuff like goofing off or not listening or whatever, it wasn't very much more than anyone else on the team, and I never had a problem with him. Anyway, we are at a football game and he pulls a personal foul for something or other. It was flag, so a personal foul can come from running into someone or getting tripped up or basically any contact the ref decides he doesn't want to let go, and one of the dads comes over and literally starts berating him for pulling the personal foul. I was busy doing my coaching thing, sending in plays, making sure kids subbed, games still going and all that, so I didn't realize it was happening until I heard the kid yelling back at this adult. Suddenly it all clicked that this young man simply acted the way he was treated and wasn't allowed to make a mistake because he was labeled as a bad kid. Anyway, I told the dad to piss off and never talk to one of my kids again like that. Really awkward to have that conversation with someone's parent, by the way, and I told the kid to not pay attention to him, and to only listen to me, and to focus on the game, because he was going back in soon. I always felt really bad for him after that though. I think he's in jail now for being in a gang. Also bonus points, he was black, and was often the only black kid on either team. Second fun bonus comment, when I coached him in basketball he was by far called for more questionable fouls than anyone else on the team. One time 3 kids collided going for the ball. It's youth sports, they do stupid shit, and as they all got up out of the pile only he got a foul for it. For those of you who don't play basketball, fouls are a big deal, because they carry automatic ejections, and give the other team free throws after a certain amount. Anyway, I was pissed, so I called the ref a racist from across the court at the top of my lungs. He didn't get a foul called on him again that game. I teach 9th grade world history in Los Angeles, USA. Most of the time I would meet a parent, it would give me much needed insight into the child's behavior and motivations. However, I did have this one student whose parents made me fear for humanity. The kid himself was actually quite bright and driven. However, he was extremely contrary to instruction, never completing work, and generally acted like an asshole with a distinct lack of empathy towards others. He was given an individualized education plan, what people in the USA use to identify any special needs students might have, that labeled oppositional defiance. In the USA, IEPs are treated like diseases, that he is a victim of this disease that is plaguing him, and that he should not be held accountable if he steals, or lies or hurts or cheats. I bought into this until I met his parents. Sweet baby Jesus, was that an experience. They were the biggest douchebag factots I had ever met on the planet. They made no appointment, barged into my room, commanded the parents I was meeting with at the time that it was their time to talk, and proceeded to blame everyone else for the fact that their child had not completed a single assignment that year and would have to repeat the grade. He was not this poor soul plagued with a mental illness that made him act against his wishes. He was just raised as an asshole from shit asshole parents. This made me mad not only at his fuckhead parents for deciding to reproduce, but also at the American special education system for describing him with a diagnosis, rather than actually diagnosing him. He continues to use his diagnosis as an entitlement, to do as he pleases, and continues to get away with it. Not a teacher but a coach. Kid I thought was just quiet or shy. Found out after meeting the parents the player was horrified at the idea of making a mistake. It clicked when his father started talking about his goal of getting his son a scholarship. The kid was 11. There was one goal. Kid that had a pretty nasty temper. Met the mother who informed me that the father was in jail for assault, 15 years for assault. That's a shit ton of assault. Had a 10-year-old that was a beast. Just loved contact. Came back the following season and he would not put himself in harm's way. Found out that at the end of the last season his father died. About 9 months later his mother was dating a guy that really took interest in the player. He died suddenly, 6 years later, and the kid is scared to death of his own shadow, convinced he could be killed at any moment. Single hardest parent meeting I ever had to have was with his mother. She was just broken. Kid that yelled non-stop. He would make a mistake and clap his hands and politely say, "Okay team, we got this." If someone else made a mistake he would lose his mind. He would be uncontrollable for a solid 30 seconds. Met his parents at a meet and greet. They argued the entire time, just nitpicking at everything the other did. I ended up testifying in the custody battle several years later. But by far the worst parent interaction I ever had, and hands down my top all-time "oh, that explains a lot" moment. A player was always sick, blowing his nose, when it was very clear he was not stuffed up, or had a runny nose. After every play he would lay on the ground holding his leg, arm, head, or groin. Every week he would show up to practice at least once claiming an injury, and could not do contact. Twice he was out sick for several weeks, and on one occasion I visited the kid in the hospital. At the parent meet and greet his mother would not stop wiping his nose. At one point he crawled up on her lap and laid his head on her. She cradled him like a baby. Kid was 12 and rocked him. Continuing to wipe his nose, she stopped our conversation and asked him if he was feeling okay. He looked at her and to me appears frightened and said he felt fine. Over the next 20 minutes she asked him over and over until he finally said his tummy hurt. 12 years old I will remind you. At that point I knew something very unhealthy was going on. Knowing the principal at his school, I made a call the following morning. While he could not say much, he indicated they were fully aware of the situation. The next season the player was back, but living with his aunt. In just over 8 months from now the kid will be getting a free education in exchange for playing rugby at one of the top universities in the US. I love coaching. The things these boys put themselves through for sport is amazing. Watching them grow has been a fascinating experience. But holy shit, do some of the parents suck at parenting. I wish people had paid attention to what was going on in my life, because things could have turned out differently. I rarely did homework or classwork, starting in 3rd grade. None of my teachers seemed to care. They just passed me even though I failed. I was annoying. I was a brat. I tattled. I didn't have friends. I screamed. I was bullied at school, but because I was so annoying the teachers didn't do anything. I remember my 5th grade band teacher berating me in class one day for saying good afternoon, how are you? She got up and spoke loud enough for everyone to hear and said, it's etched in my mind. I'll never forget. For God's sake, I didn't put you in that chair to talk to me. You're in last chair because you downright suck. That was the one class I actually enjoyed, where I felt the happiest, and she crushed it. I never bothered trying after that, and I quit the band as soon as I was able. If those teachers, or even my youth directors, had actually paid attention, they would have easily figured out I was being physically and emotionally abused by my mother. Had my band director actually taken the time to get to know me, she would have found out the reason I sucked so bad was because I was forbidden from practicing at home, because my mother said I sounded awful. A kid can't really learn an instrument only playing it for 30 minutes in class 5 days a week. I had a student who was a decent kid, not entirely there, had some goals I would want to see, but I noticed he was pretty pushy overall. He had an over-explanation of why I needed to do something for him this way or that way. It struck me odd. Then came parent-teacher conference. His parents came in and sat down. Dad looked like a shell of a person, just there and completely dead in the eyes, and mom wasted zero time to lay into me. She complained about every little C her son had in the grammar book, said his IEP says he gets double time to complete his assignments, and lets him retake assignments, and was basically making up things in the IEP list that weren't really there, how he was going to go to a good college, and I couldn't mess with her boy's future. It just went on, and on, and on. It ended with a mom threatening she wouldn't allow a substitute teacher. I was a long-term sub, but made it very clear she did not think I was a real teacher. To me, jeopardize her son's chances at a good college. The beating ended, and the boy just looked at me and reminded me, in front of his mom, he'd need 2 classes to complete the upcoming test. God damn it. No, not goddammit. I'm asking for God to do me this one solid in my lifetime, and I'm that lady. It didn't surprise me at all that he acted so entitled and had this huge idea and plan in his head that didn't seem realistic at all. His mom spent her time filling his head with how he operates is exactly what you need to succeed, and she would bully whomever to make it that way. I teach in the inner city, so I rarely meet parents. When I do, there is little to be surprised about, and you can often see the apple does not fall far from the tree. Last year, I had a student who was grossly obese in just the 10th grade, probably pushing 350 pounds, and listed as disabled for a minor surgery that had occurred many years ago. The disabled status allowed him to be even lazier and move as slow as he wanted. In fact, we were told to let him leave class 10 minutes early and arrive 10 minutes late to a class. A grand total of 17 minutes out of class, as the other students only had 3 minutes with the bell. He didn't turn in a single homework assignment all year, failed every test, and didn't even try to make excuses. He just said, "Don't have it or don't care." I'm required by law to have parent-teacher conferences, and everyone his mother had a litany of excuses. Everything from, he is disabled to he need to be in special edition. The school nurse already told the mother his disability had nothing to do with his cognitive abilities, and the school psychologist said he had nothing wrong with him except being lazy. The mother, herself grossly obese, also wore a traffic safety vest to every meeting as she had a fear of cars. After informing the mother that I was failing her son for the year in our last parent-teacher conference, She accused me of being a thief who stole her son's homework and trying to get him kicked out of the school. She eventually transferred him to a special needs school known for taking anyone on government assistance and willing to have their child classified. I do not miss that kid at all. Nursery teacher here. I had a kid that no matter what you said, he just would not respond. I usually try to be gentle and escalate to get a kid to listen. After all, it's drop-in nursery, they don't need major discipline. But this kid could not get it at all. Kid, don't throw toys like that please. It could hit somebody, or it could damage the toy, and then we won't have it anymore. He throws it again. Kid, quit throwing the toys, I'm serious. If we can't be safe with the toys, we are gonna put them away. Again. Kid, go put the Legos away now, since we can't listen, and be safe with them. I'm serious. Back in the box, and on the shelf. You need to find something else to do. No amount of this is enough. He will just sit there doing what he wants, even after I warn him that I will force the issue, or time out, or getting his parent. Nothing. I went over and physically took the Legos away to force the issue. He seemed surprised. When his dad finally came to get him, and he called him to go, I swear to God he was waiting for like 12 minutes, just standing there waiting for the kid to come on his own. This 3-year-old kid. Jesus, no wonder he doesn't listen. He knows you won't actually do anything about it. My wife told me about a student that was always having anxiety/behavior issues at school. She was trying everything to support him and get him feeling okay with what he needed to do and how to organize things. Then he would go back to being upset and frantic about his work, and then my wife, after getting him straightened out emotionally yet again, found him frantic in the morning when he was dropped off one day. She got to see how his mother was reacting. The student's mother had an anxiety problem that she was projecting onto her son, who was all of the age of 10 to 11 and didn't know what the issue was. Once my wife saw this, she realized it wasn't what she was doing with the kid that was causing the issue, but how his mother was emotionally destabilizing him. She changed her tactics and had things sorted out in about a week. My wife brings this victory up when she talks about dealing with her difficult students. She has also dealt with a prince that can do no wrong. The child was flat out lying, big whoopers that any adult would immediately question, but both his parents would take them as fact and go after her and the administration. Finally, after a lie even I could see, the parents pulled their kid. The last story I have is of a child that was having trouble from a previous school. Behavior was all wrong for the kid. Principal and my wife had many talks with the parents about trying to normalize the kid, and after 3 months were getting nowhere. Finally, in a meeting one day, one parent mentioned the difficulty in packing the boys' things up every 3 days because the parents were divorcing and the kid had been traveling between the two homes every 3 days for months. Principal read them the riot act for withholding crucial information about a child's circumstances and then booted them from the school. My wife has told me that she can look at a child and can tell if they have one parent, checked out parents, or good parents, all based on how the child behaves. I actually was the kid. I was the accident baby that threw a wrench into my parents' lives, and both of them came from abusive homes, so they reacted the way they knew how. I would show up to class with bruises saying they were from fights, which was believable, because I was always starting or jumping into fights at school. That continued into middle school where I either slept or goofed off in class, never did my homework, and pulled assignments out of my ass at the last minute. I usually got A's too. Then I just decided I wasn't going to high school and didn't show up to the first day. Fast forward 2 years, and I'm a landscaper. We finish our job and start packing up to go home, and as the only native English speaker, it was my duty to go talk to the owner, and they turned out to be one of my elementary school teachers. I mentioned that I thought I'd been in her class in 5th grade, and we had a quick conversation where she asked how old I was now, and I said I was 16. Something must have set off alarm bells for her to see a 16-year-old skipping school to mow her lawn, because she gave me her number and said to call her if I wanted to talk to someone. A couple months later I'd overstayed my welcome at my friend's parents' house and have to go back home. Quit my job because at that point in my life I couldn't hold down anything consistent and picked up a part-time janitor thing at Walmart. One day I'm looking for a reason to not go back to my parents' house, so I called my old teacher. She picked me up from Walmart and we went to McDonald's and just talked. I think she sensed I was trying to avoid going home because she sat there through some long pauses and random bullshit conversations. Then she took me home because she needed to get home and take care of her family. So she dropped me off and my mom comes out of the house screaming about some shit I don't remember and immediately throws a punch at my face. I explained to the teacher over text that I just put up with her because it's better than fighting back and having to deal with dad. She did her level best after that to keep me out of that house. She helped me get on track and wind up as a supervisor at Walmart for a while before I enlisted. So, if Mrs. Simmons is reading this, I really hope she knows how much I appreciate her. Student here, not teacher. Wanted to share anyway, because I think they got the click easily when others never did. I went to 2 different schools. One was shit. I couldn't read or do math. Nada. At home was a savage fend for yourself environment. No food in the cupboards, dirty clothes, dirty hair, sleeping on the floor with like 5 other kids type deal. Ditched with my grandparents. Sick grandpa, abusive grandma. No rules, but random beatings and beratings for behavior we weren't taught was wrong. No bedtime, no set meals. One year for a school picnic, I literally brought bread with just condiments. It was pretty fucking depressing. I got basically railroaded by that school into a special ed program for my start years. They called me lazy etc. and yelled at me when I'd fall asleep in class. My mum met some douchebag and I got put in a new school a while away. He beat me and berated pretty much over every little thing, including not knowing how to read/do math. At first they stuck me in the special kids program and couldn't figure out what was going on because my IQ testing apparently showed I wasn't even on the low end. I never acted out, but I never really had any friends. I cried all the time. I'd get angry and lash out over math. Shut down. Mute. Kids bullied me so badly because I always was gangly. It hit about 3rd grade and something must have happened because they took a huge interest in me and my well-being. I'm assuming they met my mother and stepfather and saw how young she was and how old and cheaty he was. He wouldn't have held back about talking me down. They taught me to read, the most beautiful gift anyone has ever given me in this world. They took me out of the special kids program and they got me to teach other kids who struggled to read. I spent my morning of 30 to 60 minutes of reading time teaching other kids who couldn't read. They offered to teach me to tie my shoes. They told me all kinds of things I never heard at home and encouraged me. They took off my training wheels. One day I came to school and I broke down. I'd just gotten a beating that morning, but it wasn't any worse than usual. I wasn't calmed down from it yet. I'll always remember the teacher asking me if I was okay and then putting her sweater around my shoulders. They called CPS and I got to finish my time at that school before my mom was basically told she'd have to move away from him or lose all her kids. It didn't stop him from being around and being abusive emotionally, but he never put his hands on me again. Forever grateful for whatever clicked for them when the others didn't give a shit. Looking at it, if I saw a kid who acted like that, I'd know something was wrong and reach out. Obviously whatever the others were missing, this school had it. My success is definitely due to them and all they did for me. I have 2 for you, from when I was on placement as a student educator in a kinda room. Negative. Girl would fixate on another girl, wanting to play with just her, getting way too close, ignoring when the other girl would tell her to stop and leave her alone. Would get upset real easy just by someone explaining to her that she needed to stop playing, but she could come back to that after lunch, for example. Then, met her mum. Nice enough lady, but seemed to be deliberately ignorant of what appeared, to the educators, to be delays in her emotional development, as well as hanging around for 10 to 30 minutes, to ease her daughter into the room, which would be fine if it were her first few days, not literal months into the program, and overly encouraged her daughter to go play with the one girl. I feel a little sorry for the girl, because she clearly needs some assistance, but she's not getting it. positive, one of the boys who was just a sheer delight to be around. Sure, he was like the other boys in playing around, but you get him talking on his favorite subject, which at the time was whale sharks, and he would just light up, and he would start spitting out facts and statements and grab a book from his bag on the subject. Met his mum, who was just as much a delight to talk to. She was easygoing, and gifted the educators chocolates the day after an excursion, which she helped out on anyway, as a thank you for their hard work. And, even though she had 2 kids younger than the boy, would always encourage him to give it a go. Such a great kid. I was that kid in high school. Very smart but failing everything, because of my shitty home life. My parents were divorced, and my life was awesome, while I was living with my mom, but her health was rapidly declining, because of manuscript, and my father convinced my mom to let me come and live with him. My dad was an alcoholic and his apartment was a bachelor with a pull-out couch and a second couch that didn't pull out. As a teenage girl, the lack of privacy was horrible. As soon as I moved in, my dad started making me babysit for the waitresses at his favorite pub, and then stole all my money to spend on booze. The first year I lived with him, we moved 9 times, usually into some shitty motel, until he didn't pay the rent, and then we'd move somewhere else. My clothes were never clean, unless I crammed some into my school backpack, and took them to where I babysat and did laundry. I was so embarrassed by what was going on at home, that when social workers pulled me out of class to talk to me, I denied there were any problems. I couldn't bring myself to tell them that my dad got physically violent when he was drunk, that most days all I had to eat was an apple until I babysat and could eat supper with the kids I was looking after, or that most nights I didn't get home until 3 AM after the pub closed. I was tired all the time. My high school guidance counselor was so kind to me that when she'd call me into her office to talk, all I could do is cry. I never did tell her what was going on at home, but I think she knew. Eventually, my dad threw me out, and I ended up living with a friend's family while I finished high school. The stability alone allowed me to go from failing everything to winning a college bursary. Not being hungry, tired and hit all the time allowed me to blossom academically. I only wish I had opened up to my counselor about the real reason I was failing, because once I was finally out of that situation, my life was infinitely better. Last year I had a student who defies all expectations, although in the area I work in he sadly was not that unusual. This kid finally showed up to school weeks late into the year. He was a repeat 7th grader at the age of 15. My kids were not the most well behaved, but he took it to another level. Hand him a paper or test, he would curse you out and throw it to the ground. Try to lecture, and he would scream in Spanglish/rap curses/yell the entire period to get you to stop. He called me, students, administrators, and even respected teachers terrible names, and used moth a faking nigger to describe everyone. He was unbearable. He destabilized any classroom, harassed kids, and no matter what we tried to do he never responded. Ultimately we would call in his mom about sending him to another school where he could get more support for his needs. And that's when I cried for him. This student was a terror, but as his mother walked in with a strong smell, very pregnant, wearing very worn clothing, I finally got a sense of this boy's home environment. And even when this mom came to speak to us, she quickly degenerated into barely comprehensible speech broken into Spanish full of curse words and derogatory names. In front of the teachers she called her son some of the nastiest words I have ever heard, and he cried so much. He's one of 11 kids. His father is somewhere in Pennsylvania with another family. The mom's only income is child welfare. One time he had a rotten tooth left in his mouth for months, and we had to threaten to call CPS to take him away before he got dental care. His favorite time of the year was January, when mom gets tax returns, so he could buy new shoes. He loves school despite his attitude. It's the only place he gets any love or attention. Oh man, I have a few. I worked for 6 years in a boarding school/treatment facility for at-risk teen boys. I've posted about it before. One student I spoke about recently, in fact. Student number 1 is now a great friend of mine. But in school he was kind of socially inept. Kind of overbearing as he wanted to be my friend so bad. But as a teacher I have to be very careful about being friendly vs being a friend. Anyway, the kid was brilliant. Very intelligent and insightful. Would excel at anything he was given. And to top it all off, no negative behaviors. Just a standard geeky teen really. Then I met his parents. They bring him to a 15-minute parent-teacher meeting and proceed to berate him for 10 minutes. Why are you doing so terrible? You can do better than this. He's actually at the top of the class with a 98 average, which incidentally is the highest grade anyone has reached in, not just this class but any of my classes. Well, why isn't it 100? The parents are decent people, but holy shit, get off your kid's back. Student 2. Brad. Kind of an odd kid. Reminded me of someone who was on some really good mind-altering drugs. Kind of out there and almost dreamy. Then I met his dad. He walked into the parent-teacher meeting and just stared at me. So, Brad is doing well in my class. He's got a B average. Seems to pick up on things very well. No behavioral issues. I think he'll do great. Stares. Is there anything you want to bring up? Stares. No. Okay. Well, as I said, he's doing fine, and I don't foresee any issues. Stares. Well, thanks for coming. Pleasure to meet you. I had to open the door for him to get up and leave. Very creepy. Student 3. One of famous movie star's kid. I won't say the name, but I guarantee you've heard of him. The kid was either cheese wrapping mad or the most amazing child manipulator I had ever seen. Probably a bit of column A and B. The kid was bonkers, and now you can see his profile on Facebook showing off his guns. Yeah, just what he needs. Then I met his father. He was an odd bloke. He could function normally for the most part, but every now and then he'd do something very odd. Once, out of the blue, he got this sort of "I'm better than you" vibe which he normally didn't have. I can only guess that the student was conceived while the actor was high on a hybrid plant of Kentucky bluegrass and California sensimilla. Obligatory not a teacher. Neighbor's kid was 12, ran wild and insane. Really rude to my younger kids, 8 and 4. Her younger sister was a little hyper but okay. Her mom shows up on my doorstep at 3 in the morning, wide awake, and asks to use my phone. I ask if everything is okay, because it's faking 3 in the morning and she's been knocking on my door forever like her life is ending. She said she is fine, with a look like, why would anything be wrong? I hand her my phone, and she calls someone. I wait back inside, because I'm patient and not nosy. She brings back my phone a few minutes later and thanks me, acting like nothing is unusual about this. The next day I get a call back. Some girl is screaming at me about calling her boyfriend. I said, I didn't call anyone. She says my number is on his phone and I tell her the neighbor used my phone. She said she's going to come find me and beat my ass while calling me a liar. I tell her, come on over, I have a .45 with your name on it, and I'm a marksman, could use some target practice. She hangs up. Never hear from her again. That night another neighbor, heroin addict, informs me that first neighbor has told her kids that I spy on them and tell her everything they do. I can tell now it's a real faked up situation. I go over and talk to the 12-year-old, tell her if she needs a place to go she can come see me whenever. And that's how I got my 6th kid. Long story short, the other kid is still with her mom. She tested positive for meth and heroin, but apparently CPS doesn't think it's a big deal. The reason I have one and not the other is because they have different dads and her dad took custody of her, but she lives with me. Long story. She has nothing to do with her mom or her little sister. Little sister has been coached into guilt tripping her every time she comes around, and it's too hard on her. I work as a paraeducator at a school for children with autism. I help in the classroom with all of the students, but my main focus is one high-functioning 10-year-old girl. Let's call her Sarah. Sarah lied a lot and was extremely manipulative. If one staff member told her she couldn't do / have something, she would ask other staff to try and get the response she wanted. Sarah loathed schoolwork and would do everything in her power to get out of it. Sarah's weakness, however, is candy. If she has a good attitude, participates, and does a reasonable amount of work, she can earn candy every class period. So one day she tells me first thing in the morning that she is sick and can't possibly do her work. I'll let her know that, if she is sick, that I can't give her candy today because that will make it worse. She agreed to this and ends up having a pretty good day and would have earned candy if she hadn't lied about being sick. She got picked up early that day, and just before her mom came in, Sarah said she felt better and could have her candy now. I told her she couldn't have it because the sickness wasn't cured after just a few hours. Cue meltdown. She is screaming about how big of a bitch I am and how she hates me. She tried to hit me just as her mom came in. Mom hugs the daughter and asks her what happened. Sarah said that I was being unfair and not giving her the candy she earned. I interject and tell the mom about Sarah's sickness. Mom asks Sarah if she lied to get out of work, and she admits it. Mom then tells me that since Sarah admitted to the lie, she deserves the candy and I need to give it to her. Way to go, lady. You just taught your daughter that she can lie and still get rewarded. The whole situation boils my blood when I think of it. Worked for local parks and recreation. We had an after-school program for 2nd 8th graders from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. This one boy, just your typical bad kid. He was about 11. He cursed a lot, broke equipment, teased other kids, never listened. One time he climbed a tree and stayed up there for hours refusing to come down. Just irritating shit like that. I couldn't watch him in a tree and another 20 kids inside the building doing homework. He just made things very difficult. But he had a sweetness about him. I'll let him slide too much, I know. But I felt terrible for him because I knew it stemmed from something. I found out his mom was foster mom. This woman never interacted with me and would tell me to call the cops if he didn't listen when I'd call her when he was exceptionally bad. She had about 5 other foster kids. The next year, he was back. He was telling me about his new mom and how he shared a room with 4 other boys. Like, every year this boy was calling another woman mom. And he'd call them on the phone and I'd hear him tell these women he loved them. Then he'd be in another home months later. I don't know how the system works. I don't know if the situation is typical. But I hated seeing that. He just wanted security. Permanency. I actually looked him up on Facebook a year or so ago. This was 10 years ago when I worked there. His profile pic was exactly as you'd imagined it would be. I think he had a gun in one picture. I wanted to cry. You drove me bananas, Zach, but I cared deeply for you. 10 years later I still wish the best for you, kiddo. I'm going to get a lot of shit for this, but here goes. I was teaching a high school sophomore class. There were 2 young girls actually that were quite attractive. Let's call the first one Edith. When Edith started making comments about my looks and inappropriate gestures in class, I had to call a meeting with her and her parents one night. The next day nothing changed. It actually got worse because her friend, let's call her Kate, started competing for my attention. So one day Kate would make comments in front of students, and then the next day Edith would do it. No matter how many times they were confronted, it would continue until they were eventually removed from my classroom. Fast forward 3 years later, I finished my master's degree and go on to teach at the college level. Guess who I run into? Edith. Except she is all grown up and looking fantastic. I'm a male in my early 30s and decided what the hell, it's acceptable in college. So I bring up what a pain in the ears she was and we laugh about it. She asks me out to coffee to make it up to me. We go out, have a great conversation as she explains a lot about her life and the changes she has made since her sophomore year. I was really impressed how much she had matured. Like a scumbag, I agreed to have dinner with her one night. Fast forward to date night. The plan was to meet Edith at a pretty cool restaurant, and I head over and arrive 30 minutes early to grab a drink and calm the nerves and quiet the damn angel on my shoulder. As I'm sitting at the bar looking over the whiskey menu, I hear a haunting voice from behind the bar. It was Kate. She had clearly recognized me and takes my order. Without me saying anything, Kate goes into this long apology about how she treated me in high school. I laugh it off, and we chat a bit. She asks why I'm there, and I tell her I'm on a date, but do not mention that I'm meeting Edith. I must have sat there chatting for longer than expected, but Kate slips me her number across the table. I'm hesitant. At that time Edith walks up, sees me reaching for the number, locks eyes with Kate and shit gets super awkward. I get up to direct Edith to the table, and she shoves me, full blown bully shoves me into the bar stool, and she starts yelling at Kate. They yell, and Kate comes from behind the bar. I can't even do the scene justice here, but I will try. You have these two gorgeous 20-year-olds catfighting, like we are on World Star. Edith has this low-cut top with mini skirt and Kate has white low-cut shorts on and a tank top. They are ripping each other's clothes off and cursing about high school and how Kate betrayed Edith and drove us apart. Sisters don't do that to each other. What the fuck, apparently they were sisters and had a falling out over it. I try to leave the restaurant when the manager pulls me aside and has this menacing look on her face. She angrily breaks up the fight, screams at Edith to leave, and tells Kate to get her ass back behind the bar. She turns to me, and it hits me who this woman is. It's their mother. She grabs me by the collar and screams, "You can't have your Kate and Edith too." Similar situation, though I must open with not a teacher. My mom was a teacher for 35 years, so I'm sure she has some stories, including a lawsuit a parent brought against her. They are lost. But I digress. I'm recently married, and now a stepdad to 2 elementary school age kids. We moved to a condo community a few months ago, and the kids made some neighborhood friends. My daughter comes home crying one Saturday afternoon. It turns out one of the neighborhood kids, who is actually younger than her, told her she was going to kill her or something. She was bullying my daughter into doing things she didn't want to and all the while threatening her. I went to the park and found this kid. I didn't tell, didn't swear, didn't threaten. I wanted to see what the real deal was. As soon as she learned who I was, she fell to her knees crying and begging me not to tell her parents. I go to her house and knock on the door asking to speak with a parent. A sloppy, dirty, probably drunk man and a wife beater answers the door and says he is her stepdad. By this time she had come in the house from the back and went to the entryway where I spoke to him. She immediately started crying when she saw me, and that was when it all clicked. The stepdad just laid into her. No hitting but a lot of yelling and what I considered to be borderline abusive. I mean, if he talks to her in front of strangers like that, how bad is it behind closed doors? I felt horrible, but at the same time I will not allow her to verbally assault my daughter and threaten her life. This is a kid who is always happy and joyful and in it about to let some kid with a faked up home life take it out on her. But I was able to see why this little girl acted out the way she did. I hope that she and her siblings are not being hit, and I hope they aren't subjected to horrible abuse. I don't know for sure, so I can't report any of it. But if this guy ever yells at my daughter, I will destroy his life. I was a substitute teacher for 1.5 years. There was this strange girl in class, no friends, never smiled, excellent student. She was never late and always did her assignments meticulously. Homework often done well before time, and she was hopelessly out of the loop. She didn't understand common references to TV shows that all the kids watched. So as a substitute teacher I wasn't on track to meet her parents, but the school hosted an event of the dangers of walking without reflexes on roads. She comes in with her mother and father and there is just nothing strange about them, except that they seem a bit out of the current fashion. So we, the teachers and the students and their parents, all hang out around the cafeteria waiting for everyone to show up. I knew she was interested in physics, which was what I taught. Sometimes she asked really insightful questions, but always in private after classes. So I thought I should say hello and introduce myself. After talking with them for 5 minutes it all became so very clear. Her parents were very strict Jehovah's Witnesses. No TV, no radio, no birthdays or Christmas or other festivities that were not directly tied to their religious beliefs. She had nothing in common with the other children. She was 14 at this time, I think. I actually wrote her a letter of recommendation some years ago. She still had my email and asked if I could write one for her. She had a hard time finding a place for future studies due to her parents' strict upbringing. She didn't believe that evolution happened, or that the earth is older than 10,000 years. I'm fairly sure she continued to study, since the dean of one of the universities she applied to called me with some questions regarding her. I think I dispelled his fears. Not a teacher, but this fits well here. One of my roommates for the past 2 years really irked me occasionally. He is a really cool guy, and we hang out fairly frequently now, but when we were living together it felt like he was constantly running back to mommy and daddy to fix his problems. Thing was that he was an absolute sheep to them when interacting with them. This coupled with the fact that he was prone to depression and pretty serious anxiety attacks which landed him in the hospital 2 or 3 times during the time we were living together meant that they were a fairly big part of his life. He was 25 when we stopped living together, and our relationship had gone downhill a bit because the way he interacted with his parents showed itself occasionally towards other people. Mental health issues aside, his behavior occasionally seemed like he was just attention seeking, which in hindsight he probably was. I just didn't understand where all of this was coming from. It should be noted that up to the point where he moved out I had only met his father once, and he seemed like a fairly normal dude. All of the roommates had heard stories about how his whole family was super dysfunctional, but we just couldn't understand how. His dad was a doctor with his own practice pulling in dump trucks of money a year and had provided for his family really well. On the surface it seemed like they should have been a really good familial unit. Oh boy, I was so wrong. I graduated college a year earlier than the roommate in question. I met his parents and 23-year-old, high-functioning autistic brother on the day he graduated, after they had left the ceremony early to start moving his stuff out of the house. We went to a small liberal arts college in Minnesota, so it wasn't like the ceremony was any longer than an hour and a half, but they apparently needed to get a jump start on moving. It was during the moving processes that everything just clicked. Moving is never a fun process. Lifting heavy bulky sheet from all over 2 floors of a house to the truck will get the best of everyone, especially so on a hot early summer day in Minnesota. This clearly was not part of the problem in this case. After letting them in and exchanging pleasantries, I retreated to my computer on the 2nd floor and witnessed the most dysfunctional moving attempt on the planet. Oh god, the yelling. Everything was a matter of life and death and needed to be indicated by shrill tone of voice and volume. Someone missed a step carrying a couch down the stairs which halted all moving for like 10 minutes while they attempted to assess the situation. At one point his brother saw my cat, which had been living in the house for 5 months at that point, and exclaimed that he was deathly allergic and the cat needed to leave. That halted thing for another 10 minutes. Spoiler, no one died from cat exposure. The roommate appeared at some point in this whole process fairly pissed that his parents bailed early and then proceeded to, I would say smartly, completely get out of moving by saying he was feeling faint from the heat and needed to lie down. All of this was experienced by me from my computer chair. I'm a fairly level-headed guy, and it takes quite a bit to shake me. I have never been so uncomfortable and anxious in my entire life. I can only imagine what 25 years of this would do to a human. Turns out that it turns you into my roommate. When his parents were out of earshot at one point, I apologized for not being as understanding as I could have been with all of his issues. He looked at me deadpan and just asked what they did. I had to explain that it wasn't so much anything that they had done, but instead that they just were. Our relationship has greatly improved since my revelation from this 2-hour event. It just boggles my mind how dysfunctional this seemingly normal family is. It's not like he can get away from it either, as he's still a bit dependent on them for insurance and the like. I straight up told him that he'd be better off completely cutting them off, but that's only my outside perspective and can't realistically expect him to do that. Sorry for the wall of text TLDR. Roommate has incredibly dysfunctionally family, which completely explains roommate's personality. Just want to start off by saying I'm a substitute teacher, which makes this story a bit odd. Anyway, I was working in a gym class for about a month and a half. Teacher had gotten surgery when I got called down to the office over loudspeaker. I walk down to the office to see the principal, and he tells me there is a parent that wants to speak with me. The weird part is the school allowing me, a substitute, to sit alone in a parent-teacher meeting and go over the parent's child's grade. Anyway, the child was a nice girl, but was just always on her phone, even after repeated attempts to tell her to put it away. The way grading worked with Jim was simple: don't dress or play -5 off the average. I gave this student a 95, just because I didn't feel like being a dick. I'm a substitute after all, and I didn't give anyone below an 85, even though plenty students deserved zeros. The student probably deserved around a 65 or 70 due to the fact she didn't dress a few times, and as aforementioned was constantly on her phone. When the mother asked why she didn't receive a 100, I told her the reason was she was on her phone. The mother goes on a tirade telling me her daughter doesn't even have a phone and I must be mistaken. I'm sitting there just thinking why they allowed me to even sit in this meeting just to get yelled at, and like I said, I'm not really even an employee here. I just street there for about 3 minutes getting screamed at, and finally the mother storms out and brings her daughter with her. I walked out to return to the gym, and on my way I saw the mother yelling at the security guard for taking her daughter's phone away. I wanted to call her out on it so bad, but instead just gave her a big smile. Now I know why the student was so insubordinate. Not a teacher but a mom. I have 2 kids, 6yo boy 3yo girl. They have a friend who lives in the same complex we live in, 6yo girl. Her mom works all the time and is rarely home. I get along with the girl's uncle and had met the mom a few times. I felt sorry for this little girl and would have her come over to my house a lot to spend time with her and give her a positive experience. She gets ignored a lot. She is also a huge brat. Instead of saying I need a break, she will yell I hate you, you are stupid. I don't allow that in my house and had tried so often to explain to her that it is hurtful and she won't be welcome at my house anymore if she continues to treat my kids like that. Normally she would say those things to my 6yo son, but one day she read the riot act to my 3yo daughter. My daughter comes inside crying and just broken. This other girl is her best friend and is screaming that she hates my daughter. I had enough. I didn't say anything, just took her hand and took her home. I told her uncle what had happened again and left. He told me later that he had grounded her for a few days so she can learn the impact of her words. Okay, cool. 2 days later, her mom comes home and immediately comes to my house screaming, how dare I punish her daughter? Why haven't my kids been playing with her? I thought she was grounded and that kids are just always mean and I just need to teach my kids to deal with it. Seriously? I watch your child for free, chick. It is my damn house. I get to choose how my kids are raised. She blames me for my kids being sensitive rather than having a conversation with her daughter about bullying. My kids don't really play with her anymore. This mom has also tried to spread rumors about how horrible I am. No one is buying it. I feel bad for that little girl. TLDR, kid bullies my kid. Mom blames my kids for being too sensitive. Not a teacher, but a student here. I had a teacher during my sophomore and junior year of high school that I began to frequently talk to because of how stressful living at home was. My family had moved to a new state the year prior. My mom is incredibly full of herself and would start screaming matches constantly if we weren't in line with her standards, and always talks about her work obsessively, where I began to see her as a businesswoman instead of a mother. This all began about 5 years prior because of a major psychological breakdown that she had that traumatized me, seeing one of my parents act like that when I was about to enter 6th grade. I also wasn't the best student in school, and on top of that wasn't the most social. All of that built to a panic attack in front of nearly everyone at our high school retreat. That night was a blur afterwards, so I honestly can't remember what the speaker was talking about, but I remember it was supposed to really pull at your emotions. My teacher helped me through that panic attack and we began to talk after school over the next 2 years. His classroom strangely became a sort of safe haven for me. He ended up switching schools, but we kept in touch, and I'm actually seeing him for lunch next week. Other teachers began to ask if I was okay as well, because I had a problem falling asleep in class and having issues focusing. I'm now in college doing a lot better, even though I still have to deal with that constant stress at home. But that teacher really helped me throughout my high school years, and I find myself lucky to be his friend. This may not be the best written comment on this thread, but it feels good to talk about regardless. When I worked after school at a daycare and their summer camp in following years, there was this girl I knew from ages 6 to 10 who had a lot of behavioral issues. During her worst period around age 6 and 7, she would bite, kick, yell, and violently threaten students, sometimes threatening to kill them. She apparently beat up her little sister at nights, so her parents started locking her in her room at nights. Her teacher at the time was able to get her into therapy, which helped a lot with the violent behavior, but she was still a volatile child. Over the years I continued to see a remarkable improvement in her behavior. I was proud of her. I told her that. She rarely gave me trouble. She was really a very bright and sweet kid underneath her troubles. But I did not meet her parents until she was 9 and started staying in aftercare regularly. Suddenly a lot of things made sense. This little girl had improved, as I said, but she had her days when she would act up and be hard-headed. Those days were always accompanied by her coming into my room looking sad and down, or growing sad near the end of the evening when her mom was going to pick her up. When I met her mom, she seemed to resent her kids. She was instantly impatient with them, dismissive, and wouldn't get off her damn cell phone to listen as they tried to tell her about their day. She pretended she was in such a rush, but this woman would sit in the parking lot or 1 to 3 hours every night reading magazines or talking on her phone until the last minute daycare was open. Like a switch, her little girl's behavior would do a 180. I wanted to cry sometimes seeing how much her little girl had improved, how she eagerly wanted to tell her mom how good she had been all week and what she had done at school, only to be met with icy irritation that drove her back into her bad attitude. When I met her father, he was similarly rude, ignoring his kids, being irritated and impatient, not giving a crap about anything the teacher said, good or bad. She would be in high school now, and I still think about her and her sister. I hope they are okay. I've got both positive and negative stories as a student. Sad story, I've always been a total good two shoes, but generally couldn't handle getting bad grades. In high school, I had an extremely hard time in math, and I wouldn't bring home my exams to sign. Eventually, I just stopped doing my tests in class altogether, and instead would just write sorry over and over again. Parent-teacher interviews happen, and my teacher thinks I'm not putting in effort. My dad shows up, yells at math teacher to the point where she is sobbing in front of everyone. After that, she became super protective of me and ended up leaving at the end of the school year. Luckily though, my dad helped her get a spot in a workplace she wanted to be in. But yeah, until her my teachers didn't realize that my intense fear of being reprimanded was really linked to being abused as a kid/teen. Heck, I didn't know. Funny story, administrator comes in on my first day of high school to pull me out of class. She tells me that dyeing my hair isn't permitted and I'll have to dye it back to brown. I'm super confused since blonde is my natural color, but my eyebrows are nearly black. She doesn't believe me until my family come in and we all have the same hair/eyebrow combo. Ha 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 ha, whoops. I'm another one with the terribly negative stories. I've worked as both a part-time teacher for summer school programs and as an after-school program teacher. But my biggest what the hell moment was before that, when I was working as an after-school tutor as part of a honors level college program in what amounted to community service. We were working in a really poor area of town, had a rolled converted school building not attached to any particular school. Think of it as like a pseudo daycare center for after-school tutoring for kids whose parents would pick them up a few hours after school let out. Our students ran a range of ages, but mostly were late elementary through early middle school. There was this one kid I was working with who was really bright, generally well behaved, at least in terms of he was never foul-mouthed or belligerent like some kids can get. He pretty much hated studying and rarely paid attention, but he never really acted out in terms of interaction with the other kids. It was always a little strange to me. Bright kid who loathed studying when he was easily smart enough that he could do his assignments in no time at all and have the rest of the time to himself if he'd just do it. His reading ability was especially poor for a kid his age. Well, one day he just kind of explodes with frustration because he wants to just dick around and draw instead of doing homework. Never did find out what was stressing him out that day, but because it was rather severe, he got the equivalent of detention. His parents come in the very next day to yell at us. In the ensuing argument, his parents actually say that he doesn't need to learn how to be good at math, and that learning to read won't help him get ahead in life. That they, the parents, hadn't needed it and did fine for themselves. I was shocked. I mean, this is a couple that lived in a literal slum, who seemed to honestly believe that education was pointless and wouldn't help you get a better job, so that you didn't need to live somewhere like that. I'll admit, I'm from a reasonably well-off middle-class suburb. The fact that there are people out there who honestly believe education is pointless blew my mind. And it made it so clear why children's education is important, why working hard at it is important, both as a teacher and if you're a student. And why some people's kids are so messed up in school, their parents literally are telling them that they don't need to study. That in some cases, it's not just neglect or bad parents spoiling their kids. It's that in some cases, parents outright fight the whole concept of education. People sometimes jump on religious groups about protesting public education such ed, but there are definition worse forms that I've seen firsthand. I still have no idea why that kid was even in the program if his parents didn't think it was worth anything. My only guess to this day is that they basically used it like a daycare, since it wasn't exactly a safe area of town, so maybe they just wanted their kid to be somewhere other than at home alone or something. I worked in a predominantly black school, 7th grade. I'm a white female, very young looking. I had one student that over time started talking too much. I asked him to stop. He would continue. He would switch seats every day. I told him to move back. Nope. At one point I couldn't teach because he would not be quiet at all, talking to girls across the room. I had tried calling home prior to this but no reply, so the next step was a write-up slip. He asked to go to the bathroom, and I said sure. He slams the door on his way out and called his mom in there. She calls the school asking why I'm mean to her son, why I don't like black people, why do I call him dumb, and said I think he left a bad taste in your mouth the first week because he talked a lot and now you're it to get him. She schedules a conference and doesn't show up. Her grammar is terrible, she's rude, and expects me to hate him because he's black. Requests to move him to another class and guidance counselor says no, he's the problem not the teacher. Also, I had written him a warning for cell phone use that same week. They like taking photos of students and teachers and putting it on a whole Instagram. Fast forward a few days and he doesn't make a peep, just sits there texting behind his book. I watch for a little while to be sure I'm seeing what I'm seeing, but he's so entranced by his text he doesn't notice me close by. I come up and tell him quietly, I see you're texting. The school rule is second time the school has it for 48 hours. And all hell broke loose. He said he's not giving it to me, and I called security as he started mocking me going, do you really think you want to do that? When security finally arrives he is screaming at me from on top of a table yelling why don't you like black people? You're doing this because I'm black. I ain't do nothing. That school was a mess, and he got moved to another class, so I wouldn't have to deal with him. I left in March because that school freaking sucked, and his friends tried pulling the race card with their parents too. But to be fair, it was happening to only all the white teachers. Please, I'm not a racist. If I was then I would not have been teaching there. I teach special education and have had my fair share of these moments, but one in particular sticks out. I got a new student in the middle of last year, and for the first month or so she would cry several times a day for no apparent reason, would tattle on other kids for things that didn't happen. These are 6th graders, so tattling should be a thing of the past, and basically melt down, or give me the evil eye, if I asked her to do any work whatsoever. I talked to mom over the phone about it, possibly the only way to reach her as she never seems to be at school, and was told she has anxiety. Totally not unusual for students in my class to have anxiety disorders, especially coupled with starting a new school. I figured she would settle in and make friends, and with some routine and behavioral supports, be okay. Then she started alienating all of the kids by being well, not so nice. Again, most of my kids have issues with social skills, so I figured we would work on that like everyone else does. About a month in, her best friend was playing with another girl. These are possibly the two nicest and shyest little girls you could ever meet. So this new girl goes and tells some older kids crying that the other two girls are excluding her and called her names. The classroom aide was about 3 feet away and knows this was a lie. The older kids come storming over and yell at the other two girls, and they just start bawling. After this I decided I needed to meet with the parents. I called mom, and we set up a meeting with this girl and her parents. For some reason her grandpa also came to this meeting. As soon as they walked in the door the girl starts bawling and saying she was being picked on. I know for a fact this isn't true, because there are 3 adults that basically follow my kids around. to make sure things like this don't happen. Her dad and grandpa immediately start in with the hugs. "Oh sweetheart, you did nothing wrong. You're our angel and you won't be in trouble," etc. before the meeting even begins. Suddenly everything made sense. Parents, there is a difference between loving and supporting your kids and stunting them. With some strict rules and a lot of social skills work, the tears have stopped. She has legitimate friends and seems happier all around. At school anyway. I hear at home she is much different. Wonder why. Not a teacher, but I had a really great teacher in graphics design in year 12 who I feel deserves a mention. Our class was a weird bunch of misfits, kids who had potential but were slack. Our teacher was brilliant. He never yelled, never needed to. He made sure to get to know all of us from the get-go and earned our respect. Even the bratty kids with attitude died a little inside when he said they had disappointed him. Anyways, one of the boys, Dylan, in class hadn't handed in an assessment in time, which is pretty bad. He was a bright kid who was fairly lazy in class, but it was uncharacteristic to just not hand in an assessment. Mr. M noticed that and was pretty disappointed. He addressed the whole class in saying that he was trying his best as a teacher and he expected the same back. Just before class ended, he talked to Dylan and told him he was disappointed. Dylan took it and left. The thing was that at recess, I found out from my friend, who was close to Dylan, that Dylan's mum had just been diagnosed with cancer. I'd seen Dylan with red eyes too. I figured Dylan wouldn't say anything because I knew what he was like, but I felt Mr. M needed to know. So I lingered after class until everyone had moved to their next class and mentioned it to Mr. M. He felt so bad. It physically affected him. He leaned over his desk for a second. He thanked me for telling him and talked to Dylan privately later on to arrange for him to have time for the assessment. He was such a good teacher. Genuinely cared about his students, not just about getting them to have good marks, but he tried get us to enjoy learning and be enthusiastic about life in general. I taught a career technology class. It was fun and honestly very easy. Anytime I had a student failing, it was a good bet they were failing other classes. One semester I had a student failing my class with a 58, which requires effort to fail that bad. He wouldn't act out in class. He would simply not participate, as if he was trying to fail. Even when told he simply needed to sign something or say anything, he wouldn't, and I had to give him poor marks. Finally it came up that he was failing all 6 of his classes, and it required a parent/teacher/student conference. He came in late. His parents, however, were 15 minutes early. He didn't greet them. They, however, said hello and smiled. The worst part, he had headphones on when he came in, and we could hear the music, even when we started the meeting. After a moment his dad reached over and pulled one earbud out. As soon as dad did, the student ripped them out of his hands and growled. I was listening to that. The dad raised both hands in surrender and said sorry. The counselor reached over and tugged both earbuds out and replied, no music players in school. You can have this back at the end of the day. He smiled slightly and said okay, see you then, almost politely. I can only imagine what home life was like, but I surmise that the kid was desperate for attention, any discipline, or any resemblance of actual caring from his parents. I have no idea what became of him. I changed careers shortly after. I was the student that confounded my teacher. I was a junior in high school and far more interested in finding a girl as a lab partner than actually doing anything relating to work at all. The teacher would write assignments for homework out at the beginning of class and I would hand them in at the end of class to be a pain in the ass. Despite not paying rapt attention, I would routinely A+, 97, 100%, quizzes, tests, and labs. The breaking point he met my parents at was when I was faking experimental results within a margin of error to prevent myself from having to do the really long titration lab. He was concerned that I was utilizing linear algebra to balance chemical equations when he hadn't taught us any of it and was convinced I was somehow plagiarizing/cheating. My dad was a traveling repairman and my mom was a billing admin at a hospital. They were really upset, and I remember that I had felt pretty bad that I screwed up somehow, even though I denied the charge. The teacher was really put off by this as well. Not his usual case of cheating or underperformance. Then good old mom, your sister is going to be so disappointed when she learns you cheated on chemistry. Did you steal the coursework she had saved or something? Teacher asks, wait, his sister took chemistry here? I don't remember teaching her mom. She didn't take it with you, but she got a 100 in the class. She's currently in Germany right now, but will be back in a month. She is going to be so embarrassed because her and him are very close. Teacher, why is your daughter in Germany for? Mom, she is a chemical engineer. Everyone's light bulbs dinged at once. I still had to apologize for chasing girls over actually conscientiously doing the work, but all was forgiven. Turns out when I was in middle school, my sister and I would do homework together, and I would help with her high school homework. I must have retained a lot of it. Same goes for college too, I would guess. This will probably get buried, but I was the kid in this situation, the younger brother out of two. I was blamed for everything bad that happened to our family. My dad getting cancer? Yup, was my fault. Our family nearing bankruptcy? Must be me. My mother abused me mentally and physically. My father just minded his business and didn't intervene or care to. I had to learn from a young age how to dress myself accordingly and all that. Mind you that we are a lower middle class family. We weren't poor, but hit a rough patch because of me obviously. I always loved going to school because it was my little place away from home where I get blamed for everything and constantly abused. One day my English teacher met my parents and they always put on a facade to look like saints. They constantly say how I'm not behaving at home or how I don't put in any effort. Now the teacher knows that all of this is bullshit, and bless her heart, she tried her best helping me and keeping me interested into pursuing my studies. I was a straight A student until I couldn't bother anymore. This teacher was such a lovely person. She helped me visit a psychiatrist and even paid for it. She's the only genuine person in my life that actually cared about helping me. Now I'm 20, in college and have lost all interest in continuing my studies and still being constantly blamed. My brother who's 24 is still living at home with us, but it's my fault we are still poor for not moving out when I hit 18. Just wanted to share my story. Sorry if the grammar, punctuation or spelling is not perfect. I'm not a native English speaker. Taught 8th grade English. Had a girl in my class who was, by all accounts, a perfect student. She did all of the reading on time and oftentimes read ahead. Asked great questions in class. Always paid close attention. Even helped other students who weren't doing as well. Despite this, she always seemed really nervous. Most kids at least smile when they get a 95 plus on a test, but she never did. Anything less than 100 prompted her to stay after school and ask what she could have done / could do in the future to improve. Halfway through the year we had a parent-teacher conference with her father. We didn't request it. We had no reason to. He called the school himself and asked to speak with us. All of her teachers are a bit surprised, but we give up our lunch to talk to the guy, thinking maybe there's something going on at home, or she had an issue in school that we didn't know about. It is important to note at this point that the district I work in is pretty low income, but this guy looked anything but. He walks into an informal parent conference in a nice suit, expensive watch on his wrist, Mercedes keys in his hand, which he was sure to leave sitting on the desk in front of him for the whole meeting. Once we all introduce ourselves, he proceeds to pull out papers, copies of his daughter's old report cards, and lay into us about fluctuations in her score. How do you explain the 88 in Q2 when she had a 95 in Q1? Has her Q3 progress improved? Etc. All of the teachers try to explain to him that his daughter is doing great in all of her classes, has a lot of friends, is very well liked, but he only cares about the numbers. He tells us that he went to Harvard, his son is going to Yale, and his daughter, again, 8th grade, is going to keep up the Ivy League tradition. I could only imagine the pressure he put on that girl, but as teachers there was nothing we could do except reassure him that we'd push her to keep improving. I made sure to reassure her after every assignment that she was doing great, but I'm not sure how much it helped. My wife is a teacher. I'm a lawyer in the same small town. She was complaining about her child's behavior, and from the sounds of it, it was completely out of hand. Yelling, swearing, calling teachers beach and sludged, hurting, really hurting, other children, etc. It was a public school, so the kid couldn't even be expelled. Anyway, she mentioned the kid's first name. I made some educated guesses and worked out that the kid's father was an ex-client of mine who pleaded guilty to a whole slew of offenses. I briefed counsel to do the plea, and he got about 7 years. The kid's mother was a client of mine in a family law matter where she was trying to get custody of her sister's children. I quickly dropped that case when evidence came out about her biological children, some of whom had already been taken by the state. There were also accusations of abysmal parenting, ranging from excessive punishment to complete lack of discipline. Her other kids were even more of a mess. I was also acting for the mother in some guardianship proceedings, where the state is trying to take away her remaining children, but she fired me before we got a result. Probably because I told her she was about to lose anyway because the mother's partner kept the town marijuana dealers in business. Like, he smoked about $100 a day, constantly. He also was facing charges of child abuse, but not represented by me, thank God. That one kept me up at night for a while. Another story, same town. I was instructed by a kid facing some minor criminal charges. Trivial things like trespass on school grounds out of hours, and some minor damage property offenses. Kid got a bond, no conviction, good result. Anyway, the father comes to see me a year later facing charges of domestic violence, abuse, and unlawful threats. The mother has taken the kids and nicked off. By the time the mother admits the charges were made up, she was too settled with the kids in the big city for us to force a relocation. Amazingly, the other kids in that family were great students. I was a tar during university, and this year there were 2 of us, the other being a typical blonde hair blue-eye cute girl. Usually, I never get the pleasure of dealing with parents, but this one student was constantly berating the other tar, but wouldn't be in my face at all. But he would not actually do the lab work as required, thinking he knew better. Sometimes, when I attended the lecture component as needed, that same student would constantly contradict the professor and try and provide edge case arguments to generalizations, which as some of you logical people know, isn't an argument and just wastes lecture time. But being a hippie liberal female professor, she just smiled and agreed to his antics. Example, prof says programs require RAM as primary performance metric, and gives examples. Student then raises hand and says that the OS sometimes uses Pagefile which is an HDD, therefore RAM isn't primary performance metric. RAL is. Fast forward to after the first midterm, the student in question was furious about his failed grade so far. We were giving him zeros during labs due to his lack of actually doing any assignments, and his midterm was barely a pass, despite his perfect attendance and participation marks. After that class, the parents of the student showed up and began berating the professor, and the father wanted to single out and call on the tar. She shyly stood up and approached them with me, the whole time the father saying things like "you disgust me." The mother was silent, holding her head down, standing behind the father, wearing a full burqa. Then it clicked. The student was just following the ways of his father, which included viewing women as lesser humans. Never have I seen this kind of bullshit outside of television. And this was almost 2 decades ago. I've told these before, but I don't mind sharing again. Student would threaten to kill me, stab me, claw out my eyes, watch me bleed, shove pencils into my arms, etc. Had to maintain a record of this as this student was going to be evaluated. Before student got the behavioral therapist, student flipped the desk he/she was using over onto the back of my legs as my back was turned to write something on the board. Desk took off a good bit of the skin off my ankle, and I ended up having to go to see a doctor ASAP. Met with the mother later, and found out that the mother had taken student off the prescribed antipsychotics without telling anyone, and was also letting an older cousin sleep in the same bed as the student. Student was a first grader. Brilliant student, same class, hard worker, excellent reader. Met the mother, she was on her son about being a good person and being successful. Found out she used to be a gangbanger, and had finally gotten out, to make a better life for her dope kids. Loved that family. Did a project when I worked with special needs preschoolers, where we took all their stats, height/weight/eye color/hair color, along with interests at the beginning of the year, and then at the end, so we could talk about how some things changed and some stayed the same. Was also something fun for the parents to take home. One student, 4 years old, weighed almost 70 lbs, met the parents. Oh, yeah, he wasn't going to get a lot of healthy life habits from them. Taught middle school computers for a bit for half of a school year. Had a big PowerPoint project that the students worked on for about a month. They got class time to work on it, and each week, they would have to email me what they had gotten done. One student refused to do work, ever. She just sat there the entire time. Each week, they were given rubrics so everyone knew what was expected. They also all had a final rubric for the end result. She kept getting zeros. After the end project was finalized, she received a glaring 0. Her parent called a special meeting with me, the student and guardian, and the principal. There were all kinds of excuses made, but I had luckily kept the signed rubrics from the kids, so they knew what was expected. The guardian still tried to make excuses. I held firm. The student recently tried contacting me on Facebook telling me she forgave me because everyone makes mistakes, meaning that I had made a mistake. I didn't respond. I had a lower economic Hispanic student in one of my classes. First generation American and son of a farm worker. He was funny and would often disrupt class and say stupid shit. I knew his home life wasn't the greatest, so I gave him a lot of patience. One day he decided to lay on the floor, and when I asked him to go sit in his chair he gave me the finger. Didn't say anything, just the finger. He thought he was funny, or that we had some student/teacher relationship where that was acceptable. I sent him to the office. I didn't feel like dealing with his shit. As it happened, he had been getting into trouble in a lot of other classes. His mother had to come to school because of it, and I had to meet with her, the principal, and himself. His mother shows up. She can't speak English at all. Luckily the principal can, and she's holding her baby. I realized that she was probably pulled out to work to come deal with her son and also has to carry her baby with her. I knew that his father wasn't a part of this student's life and that his mother was taking the weight of the world on her shoulders. The principal, who had dealt with this student often, was rather pissed and tired of his constant troublemaking. After describing the situation to principal and his mother, the principal decides to kick him off the baseball team. Mind you, the student is rather overweight. He looked absolutely defeated, something that could be described as kicking a puppy on Christmas. I think it was about at that point it kind of all made sense. He was just some poor kid trying to make sense of his life with very little support from his mother. She just didn't have the time/money/education to take care of an energetic teenager. I pull the principal aside and ask to speak to him in private. I end up telling him that he needs to stay on the baseball team because it's probably one of the few structured events he likes doing and has the opportunity to participate in. The principal is at the 0 facts limit and really doesn't like my idea. We come up with a compromise that this student can hang out with the janitor every Friday for a month after school and clean/wax/vacuum some floors, or he can give up his spot on the team. Naturally, he chooses to clean floors. I felt this was more than adequate. I never told him how much I had to push to let him stay on the team, and he never forgave me after that. I could tell he always held a silent grudge. It's clear he was being a sheet at the time and needed to be punished, but I didn't want to destroy one of the few positive things in his life. I still feel conflicted when I think about this situation. Most importantly, however, I take a lot more time/consideration when dealing with people if I'm unaware of their situation. One of my partners is a teacher. She tells a story of a student she had several years back that was just awful. This kid would do things far beyond what most kids acting out would do. There was lots of yelling, throwing, walking out, etc. At the time, teachers were instructed to not write up minority kids because studies showed that writing them up increased the likelihood of pipelining them into the prison system, and the objective was to close the achievement gap between minority and white students and keep them out of prison. So the administration was unwilling to suspend any students acting up, even to the extreme actions that this kid was taking. since the teachers would lose face if they sent a kid to the office and they came back with no punishment. All the teachers had to deal with this kid constantly disrupting classes without sending them to the office in most cases. The counselors were the only ones that could help, and they would only say that this kid had a bad family life and that the teacher should just try to deal with it as best as they could. This was too vague for any of the teachers to really know what was going. A bad family life could refer to almost anything after all. So they just dealt with it for the years that this student was in their care. A few years later, my partner was watching a TV show where they fix up poor people's houses for free, and she suddenly realized that she recognized that past student there on the TV show. Although the counselors were never open about the home life situation, this show put everything out there in the open. This kid's mother died violently in front of them, then their father too, just a few weeks before starting school in my partner's classes all those years ago. The child had been raised by his aunt who was constantly on drugs and didn't get a stable home life until years later when the grandmother finally took him in. Ever since then, when a counselor tells my partner that a student has a bad home life and they just need to deal with them, she remembers that kid and ends up being much more understanding of the child's actions, even when they act out in the extreme. I teach creative writing at a high school. I have one female student who is very soft-spoken, very sweet, always works hard on her assignments. Our school is 1-to-1. Each student has a school-issued laptop, so many of our school assignments are online. Some students who aren't as familiar with using the internet often struggle with this. For their first online assignment, she didn't submit her work, so I gave her a 0. All of their grades are posted online on their homepage, so she could immediately see it when she logged into her email. Less than an hour later, she sends me a very emotional email. She is sorry, she didn't know how to submit her work. She is extremely upset that I gave her a 0. She doesn't want me to think she's lazy. I was really taken back by her tone. She wasn't angry or confused, she was heartbroken. I could practically hear her crying as she wrote that email. I'll let her know, of course, that she could still turn in her work, and that if she ever had issues turning something in, she could always ask for help. I met her guardians at an open house. She lives with foster parents who are in their 60s. I find out that her foster dad drives her to my school from a small rural town with a large meth problem in a border state over 45 minutes away, just so she can go to a decent school. Her foster mom had a stroke a year ago and is in a wheelchair. She kept saying, "This girl is my baby. I can't help her no more." That's all she could say. It broke my heart. Now I make sure to praise her work whenever I can, without overdoing it. I can only imagine the kind of household she lived in before she went into foster care. On an unrelated cringe note, when her foster parents came into my classroom, I instinctively went to shake the woman's hand, not realizing she'd had a stroke and couldn't move her body. I'm the kid. I've traveled a lot because of my parents' job between 2 different countries. We've moved from one country to another one every single year up to my 6th grade. In consequence, my language abilities were extremely bad. I wasn't really able to read, write, and communicate with others to the point that I learned my alphabet in the 5th grade. On the year of my 6th grade, we've finally stopped to move all around Europe and settled down in France. The professors as well as the students thought that I had some mental problems which could be related to my academic lateness. So far I know, my math teacher was the only one to believe in me, since I had a better understanding of mathematics. From grade 6 to 9 I did my best to improve my language skills. It was hard, because each year the language requirements rose and unfortunately I wasn't able to follow the tempo. A year before the passage exam between middle school and high school, the prime teacher called my parents to discuss my special case. So far I know, it was the first time my parents explained my academic past, our current family situation. They've got a lot of arguments since I'm young and finished by divorcing during high school, and how it could impact me. Their conversation was really long. Shortly after I received more help to improve my language skills, I felt that the way how my professors perceived me has changed, and they became more optimistic about my future. Progressively me and my family got closer with her to finally became really close friends. Thanks to my prime teacher I managed to pass all through the high school years, obtain my degree which allowed me to get a scholarship for an abroad university. Without her help I wouldn't be able to survive high school years and achieve all these things. Since then, I always try to help my peers. This my way to give back what she gave me during all these years. I owe you so much. I was that kid. High school was hell for me. I'm a smart woman, evidenced by my 4.0 GPA in college. However, while I was in high school I was extremely sick. I didn't get properly diagnosed until the end of my senior year. As a result I missed a lot of school. I had an individualized plan so that I couldn't be kicked out of school for all my absences. On top of normal high school drama, being so sick I could hardly function. I was living in a really rough environment. My mom tried her hardest, but she was varied from neglectful to smothering. My stepfather worked hard, but he had a horrible temper. Also my biological father walked in and out of my life so many times during that time span. And there was abuse. I don't like talking about it because I've overcome the abuse and the hurt with a bit of therapy and a loving and wonderful grandmother. It got so bad at one point I would lie to all my teachers about what was going on at home. But my teachers didn't believe me. They thought I was a loser and just wasn't trying. Or that I was faking despite the numerous notes from doctors and visits. I fell further and further behind in my classes. I ended up having a massive seizure 1 week before I was set to graduate and ended up falling short of the credits I needed. But I got my GED, went to college and maintained a 4.0. I didn't get to prove to my teachers that I was worth something and that I was smart. But I proved it to myself. This happened back in the late 90s, and I was a stupid first year teacher trying to make a difference. I was working at a low income school district. So, I have 4 10th grade kids who were failing due to a lack of work, skipped tests, didn't turn in homework, etc. So I took them out in the hall and told them that I was going to keep them after school every night until they got their work in. Called their parents and told them the same. Parents all told me that they could not pick up their kids after school due to work. So I told the parents that I would make sure they got home. I had a huge spook and decided I would drive the kids home. Not my brightest idea. So 4 nights go by and we get all the work complete. Every night I bring the kids home, 4 stops in 4 different damn towns, and guess who is home with a working car? The damn parents. I went in to visit each parent and all were on the couch watching TV. No care about picking up their kids. I vowed never to do this again. Besides the liability issues, the parents' lack of caring about their kids forced me to understand that I could never succeed with these kids. Cycle of poverty would continue. Another story, I had a sweet kid who did nothing. He was sweet and had a good sense of humor, but refused to do anything but sit in class. Not disruptive. So I pull the stay after school bit, and he still refuses to do work. Do this for 3 nights, same, nothing. So on the 4th night his dad comes to pick him up, and I walk the kid out to talk to the dad. I explain to him what was going on and the kid basically switches personalities, tells his dad to fuck off. Not once but 5 times. The dad just shrugs and says I can't do anything to help and leaves with the kid. I had no hell of a chance of getting this kid to do anything if he treated his dad this way in public. Plus his switch from a sweet lazy kid to the Antichrist freaked me out. I no longer work in education. After 8 years of this type of stuff, I got burned out with giving a piece of my soul to people who did not want to learn or make the world a better place. I'm no longer in education, but I did work 10 years up until last year. If I had to pick one child I would say it would be one of my kindergartners named Amir. Amir came to us an absolute wreck. I'm not saying he would just not stay in his seat. No. Amir would run out of the building. Since the school is situated right next to the freeway it would be a hell of a time trying to get to him before he was injured. Amir was not the kind of kid who pushed another student, no. Amir would punch numerous students. On my way to the class one day, after receiving a call that all hell had broken loose in the class, I watched as 4 other students came walking down the hall. Each of them was holding an injured appendage. One a leg, the other an arm, another kid his face, and the other his head. All of them crying. Amir wasn't disrespectful either, unless you count the times he attacked staff, including taking an abacus and using it to knock his own teacher out, giving her a concussion. Now up to this point we had reached out to the family, but we had never met them. Never an open house. Never a parent-teacher conference meeting. No shows at CSE meetings. Things like this. This is when I took it upon myself to go out to the house with the social worker. We pulled up to this house and the yard is just littered in kids' old toys. An old woman walks up to us and asks us what we are doing there. In the meantime there was open air drug dealing going on right at the house next door to where Amir lived. This is an inner city neighborhood, a very dangerous one. Once we told the old woman who we were. She announced she was Amir's grandmother. She told us we were lucky she was outside because those men weren't going to leave you alone for long, referring to the gang dealing drugs who had started to surround my car but left once they saw me talking with grandma. Grandma explained to me that she could leave if she wanted, but she feels she has to be there for the kids in the neighborhood because they don't feel safe, but they knew they were safe with her because the gang left her alone. I had the time to talk with Amir's mother that day as well. She was very angry, yelling and screaming at me about her son being classified and how she didn't want that. She told me she was dying of cancer. I don't know if I believe it or not. I hope it isn't true. Every word that came out of her mouth had venom attached to it. I thought she was going to hit me a few times. After that it became clear to me why Amir was the way he was. He needed structure. He never had structure, and although he craved it at times, it was impossible at times for him to accept any sort of structure. Not to mention, all the men on his block were strapped up dope dealers. How was I ever going to make him understand me, or even scare him with consequences into behaving like a human being? He looked at me like a joke. He wasn't scared of any of us. He had real things to be scared about, and it wasn't some teacher or administrator. I have hundreds of stories like this too, by the way. In fact, I had a family of 8 children who were being pimped out by older siblings in the school a year before that. That helped me understand why the youngest refused to talk, to the point where he needed services as a result of it. It's a tough world out there. Glad I'm not a part of that anymore. My gut couldn't take it. From my friend, I had a student, high school freshman, that was extremely combative with me. If I assigned a start of class activity, he would ask why he had to do it. If I assigned a fill it in your self-study guide, he would ask why I wasn't doing my job and telling them the answers. He rarely did his work, so I had mostly zeros for him in my gradebook. The students are not allowed cell phones during class. I had to tell this student 3 times to put his phone away. Each time he ignored me, so I walked over to his desk and demanded he give me his phone. He responded by saying, "I ain't giving you a faking thing, bitch." I immediately started writing him up and told him to go to the office. He tried apologizing, even putting his phone on my desk, but I told him I had given him enough warning and he was out. I took his phone and put it in my locked desk drawer. My policy, which students and parents know, I have them all read and signed the syllabus the first week of school, says all phones will be held 24 hours if I have to take them up. This happened on a Friday, so the student couldn't get his phone back until Monday. I was called up to the office an hour after the incident. The student's mother was in the office, yelling at staff and claiming racism because I took her child's phone. My principal had already explained that the student was disruptive and that he wasn't following direction. The mother then cussed out the principal, saying the student doesn't have to give up his personal property to a faking beaches teacher. Security removed the mom and the principal suspended the student for 3 days. The mom showed back up Monday demanding the student's phone, which I gave her, and his grade. When I told her that he had a 17, she flipped her sheet again and claimed I was racist. I told her that I had over 90 students, only 5 of which were white, and that most of my students were passing, so clearly it was an issue with her son, not my teaching or presumed racism. The student was placed in alternative school for the remainder of the year. I'm that kid, and there is more of a story, but here is just a small snippet. My dad worked up to 80 hours a week, and was also an alcoholic. but never was abusive, and my mom was very sick as she was in remission from cancer, but had other health issues, and was constantly strung out on all of the heavy-duty medications that my mom was on. I remember one day in 7th grade my English teacher made us do a poetry assignment, and we had to choose a song to recite in front of the class. I chose the song Adam's Song by Blink 182 and had no idea what it was really about. I remember reading it in class and my teacher looked at me so concerned, and I didn't know why. I ended up going to the counselor's office as I had been sent there, and they spoke to me. I learned later on in life it spoke about suicide, and I guess subconsciously that's how I felt. That is when they found out that I had been staying up till 2 AM or 3 AM, or even didn't sleep many nights, because I would have to pick my mom up when she fell, or hit her head, or was too strung out to act like a human. I would have to get her off of the toilet when she passed out, or when she would walk outside in the middle of the night and we couldn't find her. In 10th grade she passed away, and I was destroyed, and still am. I was never able to grieve or mourn properly and still have issues. I remember the counselors in high school asking me, "Do you really want to graduate? Because you obviously do not care about education." I informed them that my mom died, and all they could faking say was, "Well, we need proof that she did fuck those people." To all of you who struggle, things get better, I promise. Here's a different take. I was teaching my first series of university courses and was required to do advising. I had a young girl. She was very sweet and absolutely wanted to be at university. She had a number of learning difficulties, and one of them manifested as a difficulty with arithmetic. To complete her program, she was required to take advanced statistics classes, but she just couldn't cope with the math. Our university is Kafkaesque. It is a major research institution, but one of our many flaws is that the heavy union presence has created a not my job mentality. Consequently, processes are broken, and getting anything done is a serious uphill battle. Students who don't fit into nicely defined boxes can be really out of luck, and in some instances, I would suggest they transfer. Operationally, getting things done can be impossible. Anyway, I digress. One day, I was advising, and the student comes in and tells me that her mother had come. Mother was an equally nice woman who was really just worried about her daughter. I could see the mother was ready to go to battle. She had admission and program information all in a file, had program information printed. I knew this was going to be tough. Knowing the university, she had probably been faked by every segment of the administration. Our school's phone service rate was through the roof. Despite having hundreds of lines, we would often see that someone would be connected and on hold for 45 minutes to an hour. Sometimes more. I figured mama was coming to the source. The daughter had been put into this program by the university and told her that she needed to complete at least a year's worth of credits to transfer with a GPA of 3.0. The issue is that she needed to take Stat Science second, which I taught, and needed at least a 75% in both to make a 3.0 GPA. Well, this wasn't going to happen. She could maybe pass, but it wasn't likely. Basically, this kid was screwed. Our university abolished undeclared majors and required all students be funneled into programs, often things like philosophy, sociology, and development studies. Programs that are niche, and unless you're interested in them, the classes would not be to your liking, making earning a 75% that much harder. So, mom comes in. She wants her daughter transferred to a different program. She's very polite, but very firm. I realize what mom wants, but I can't get someone out of prereqs. However, our university offers a number of program options. You could have a BA in development studies with a specialization in culture, economics, or infrastructure. Depending on the specialization, you have different requirements, but switching between specializations within the same degree doesn't require anything. So, I recommend that she switch from infrastructure to culture, which eliminates the need. I drop her from my Stat Sci class and sign her up for different classes. Easy peasy. The student had a smile. Mother had a grin. Daughter goes to pee or play on her phone, and mother tells me that she too cannot do math and was told she was stupid. She didn't want the same for her daughter and was fighting the Kafka system we had set up. Usually, parents want to contest a grade or want preferential treatment for a kid, but this mom was fighting a stats class. Not something you see. Then it clicked. This mom had been made to feel dumb her whole life and her daughter was facing the same thing. It was probably the most satisfied I ever felt teaching an undergraduate course, as teaching undergraduates has become a terrible job, sadly. Not my story, but my mom's. My mom is an ESL teacher for immigrant children. Just a bit of background information. It's a private school just a few blocks from the border, and so most of the student population cross the border either on foot or by car to get to school every day. Well, one semester, my mom had this 12-year-old girl who would cry for everything. If she got a bad grade on a quiz, tears. If she didn't get the partner she wanted, tears. If she was called on in class, tears. It got to the point where my mom felt the need to involve the school counselor. They were worried about possible abuse in the home, etc. Then she started making big accusations against people in the school, including my mom. She told the counselor she was being bullied by the rest of the girls in the class. She said that my mom had intentionally humiliated her in front of the class because she failed a test. She even went as far as accusing several boys in the class of touching her. As expected, this all became chaos, trying to interview students about the accusations and my mom, etc. Weirdly, the parents never got involved and never answered any phone calls or letters that were sent home with the girl. At the parent-teacher conference, my mom brought up all of these problems to them, and they were seemingly oblivious to it all. They asked her if it was true, and she started crying, to which they responded by giving her a candy and telling it was okay, and that they believed she was innocent. For every negative thing that my mom would bring up, including her below average grades, the little girl would start crying, and her parents would immediately hug her, give her a candy, or do whatever it took to stop the crying, while telling her that it was okay, and that she would get what she wanted. Not really sure what happened with the little girl, but she didn't return to the school after the conference. Late to the party, and not a teacher but there were two little boys that were brothers in my daughter's head stat class. I used to volunteer there a lot, go in, help with the kids, help with getting lunch and snack ready, play with kids at recess, and these boys made me nervous. Neither of them could talk, and they were 3 and 4 years old. I would kind of understand limited vocabulary, but these boys had none. They communicated by smiling, frowning, shrieking, whining, hitting, and grabbing. They didn't follow any directions. They wouldn't stay on the rug for story time. They made a huge mess of everything during craft time. Even when it was time to eat, they didn't seem to understand what the fork and spoon were for. They dug in with their hands and faces. They were very nearly feral in my opinion, like nobody had bothered to raise them. But they showed up dressed and ready with their backpacks every day, and handling them was always a really difficult chore. Now, being there as much as I was, sometimes I couldn't stay because I had work or other obligations. One of the days I wasn't there I get a call, and I'm told that the younger of the two boys bit my daughter and made her bleed. Mama Bear wasn't happy. I asked what they were planning to do, and they said their mom would be picking them up in person that day, instead of them riding the bus, to talk about the incident, and I was welcome to stay for that. I got there first, on time. We waited and waited, and about an hour after the bus had left with all the other kids the two boys' mom shows up. This woman, I don't know if I can describe her accurately. She was wearing a dirty t-shirt that was too tight on her overweight body. Her jeans were too loose though, because she had her ass crack on display for everybody. Her hair was stringy and greasy, but the most important detail was her face. I don't know how to describe it, but her face looked vacant, devoid of any thought, lacking some spark of understanding or intelligence. She just looked like a body with no mind. Her mouth hung open the entire time, and I swear to God she drooled in some moments. Anyway, the conversation was short. The teachers tried to explain to her all the concerns they had about the boys, including their lack of communication and violence, especially now, since the younger one had broken my daughter's skin. The mom just nodded, no facial expressions, and half grunted yeah, and sorry and I don't know. After the meeting there weren't any more violent incidents for the rest of the year. But by the beginning of next year the two boys were brought in at drop-off time by their grandparents. They both called their grandma Ma and their grandpa Da. I asked one of the heads to dates what happened, and she told me on the down low that in a nutshell, they'd called child services and raised their concerns. The mom didn't handle the visits from child services well, and apparently their living environment was not great. Some amazing child services worker deemed the mom unfit to be raising the boys considering their behavior and mannerisms so far, coupled with her mental state, which I took as, this woman is as dumb as a box of rocks and isn't raising her kids. Get the kids the hell out of there. In the end, the boys were placed with their grandparents. They don't go to my daughter's school anymore though. Apparently the school couldn't cater to children that were so developmentally behind. They got transferred to a place that can handle them and help them get to where they need to be. Edit, a word. This will get buried. Not a teacher, but a student. When I was younger, for all of my elementary school experience, I was heavily bullied by one girl. She was always turning my own friends against me, taking my things, sabotaging what I wanted, snitching on me, hitting me, and just generally being a little bitch. She bullied more people than just me though. She was also a constant liar. She was Winnie, and just generally an awful person. Then one day, the school counselor brought in her mom, as well, and my mom and the mothers/fathers of some other kids being bullied. After all of us, the kids, had told the girl's mother how we were being treated, and had been treated for years, she started saying that there's no way her daughter could've done this. All of us were lying. We are out to get her daughter because we're jealous. And then she started picking on all of the parents and kids right there, pointing out shit about our parents and why we must be messed up. Her mom is a bully, so she was too. Also, her parents were divorcing around this time too, so her mom probably took her anger out on her. It clicked, but it was hard to forgive her for anything she did. Some of the mean shit she said wasn't playground taunts. To cite one example, she told a Muslim boy, a friend of mine then, that he was ugly, his mom was ugly too, and that they were all dirty Arabs. This girl was faking crazy. I teach at an after school, and I had the worst student ever several years ago. This kid was downright mean, lied constantly, stole other students' games/iPhones, set off the fire extinguisher in the boys' restroom, deliberately hid his homework in every nook and cranny at our school, cursed a lot, and got into many fights verbally/physically with other students. On top of that, he was ill-mannered, had no clue about personal hygiene, and was quite a barbaric kid. Mind you, this was a third grader. I did my best to help turn him around, stayed after hours tutoring him, tried talking and listening to him, tried to instill some manners/values in him, to no avail. Then, I met his parents for the first time. Let me just start by saying his own mother said this: I don't care if he brings home D's and F's from school, I just want him away from the streets, and away from doing bad things. Like what? This kid was in the 3rd grade. Then, a coworker of mine visited his home because he stole a video game from a fellow student and swore he didn't have it. So the coworker went to his house with him, and lo and behold, the game was sitting on his desk in his room. But, the worst thing about her visit, she said, was that the house was a complete mess with dirty clothes everywhere, dirty dishes in the sink, just an unsanitary home environment. It's really unfortunate, but when you raise a child like an animal, he will behave like one. This kid ended up leaving our after school, and last I heard of him, he was kicked out of every public school in our county, every private school as well, and now attends one of the worst schools, where juvenile delinquents are sent. Quite a sad story, to be honest. TLDR, kid tries to stab summer camp staff. Turns out he has mental problems that his mother didn't record on registration form, and she's doing nothing to help him. I was an assistant teacher at a summer kids college program. Kids spend the day on the college campus and take fun classes like programming, arts and crafts, etc. I was assisting for a Lego Storms class, which was so badass, let me tell you, and we had this one kid, let's call him Michael, about 9 years old, who was not quite right. He was very antisocial and never wanted to do any of the projects we assigned him. I've dealt with tough to crack shy kids before, and they usually warm up to you, but this kid was very different. He would randomly just walk out of the classroom and wander the hallways, or refuse to do anything. He did this for a couple days after the camp first started, and we tried to just deal with it. Eventually, we decided to just forget about trying to doing Lego stuff with him, and just gave him a piece of paper and some crayons. This is where shit got weird. He would just draw violent pictures, like people getting their heads chopped off and stuff. Whatever, boys will be boys. I drew dumb violent shit all the time too. The last straw is when he drew of himself cutting the ears off of his cat. And then he would brag and giggle about it when we asked him. We brought him down to the office of the camp manager and brought her up to speed with what's been going on. We leave Michael with the camp manager and head back to the classroom. About 10 minutes later we hear screaming and the camp manager is running down to our classroom. Apparently Michael tried to stab her with a pair of scissors. A janitor who was nearby heard her screaming and came to the classroom to see what the fuck was going on. Camp manager filled him in, and the janitor stormed over to the manager's office, where Michael was still locked in. When we all walked in, Michael was trying to cut the phone line. When he saw us, he ran towards us with the pair of scissors, and the janitor grabbed him and put him in a full Nelson. I felt like I was in a faking horror movie or something with this kid. The janitor held him down on the ground while we called his parents, who we told to come down immediately. He was screaming like a wild animal, so I'm sure his mom heard everything. Mom shows up, and we tell her everything. She doesn't act surprised at all, but starts crying. She tells us that he has some mental and behavioral problems, no sheet, which she did not note on Michael's medical form when he was registered for the camp. She told us she neglected to fill out that portion of the form because he's out of control, and she needed to find a way to relax for a while. We asked if he was going to a therapist at all, and she said no. It was very sad to hear, but also incredibly irresponsible. It was a pretty messed up situation. I'm pretty sure he had the traits of a serial killer, and it was pretty freaky seeing it in person. I'm a martial arts teacher. I was at a tournament last year, and happened to be near the kids' ring. One of the kids caught my eye. He was not chatting with other competitors, stretching, warming up, being reassured by his parents, none of the usual behavior. He was just walking around with his hood up and his headphones in, brooding. If you do martial arts tournaments regularly, you know the trope, the warrior amping himself up before the glorious battle. This one moment for which all training prepared him for. It's an obnoxious abrasive attitude that's not at all conducive to a friendly or safe environment, and more disturbingly, this mantle is usually donned by single dudes in their late 20s, not 10-year-old kids. So, it's fair to say I was predisposed to disliking this kid and his attitude before his match even started. I figured he would go in too hard and show only the minimal required amount of respect to his opponent or the judges, and unfortunately, I was right. He was up against a younger, smaller student, and ended up cracking the kid's ribs. He was running circles around the kid in terms of skill. That level of violence was absolutely unnecessary. It was just arrogance and a total lack of courtesy and respect thrown into the face of the virtues that most martial arts instructors teach their students. Even though I didn't know either of the kids, I was fuming with anger. When the match was over, I went to the smaller kid and told him he had done a good job and that even though he lost, he probably learned a lot more than the other kid. I felt like I'd done my part, so the day went on without event. At the end of this particular tournament, they had each of the schools line up to receive their trophies, and I spied the asshole kid standing near me with his dad. The kid had an armful of trophies. He turned to his dad and said, surprisingly meekly, "Can you take a picture of me with my trophies?" And the dad responds along the lines of, "Yeah man, let's show them how much as we kicked today." So the kid grabs a couple of big trophies and a smaller one he got for third place, and the dad goes, "Not that one." I saw the hurt in the kid's eyes as he put the little trophy down, and then I saw him harden himself as he turned around for his picture. The exchange must have taken 5 seconds, but the entire dynamic became crystal clear to me, and my heart broke for the little guy, a pretty big change from only hours earlier, when I was ready to jump into the ring with him myself. Not exactly what you were asking, but I teach music and math privately, and I can tell a good amount about how the student will do, based on the condition of the house. When I first walk in, Especially the piano. If the piano is in disrepair, dusty, dirty, in the same room as the TV, which someone is watching, right before I come in, forget it, you've shot your kid in the foot already. And in general, a messy, disorganized house is a bad sign of things to come. Have to clean off space on the table, just so we can have room to sit down and do math. And you didn't even think to do that before I arrived? Yep, not good. As far as the parents, the big lesson to me is that you work real hard on that piano/math thing or I'll be angry with you. Doesn't work very well at all. If you want your kid to be good at math, the very best thing you can do is to know and care about math yourself and to provide an environment where knowledge sharing is part of the family life. The best students are often kids of professors and professional people who live and breathe knowledge as part of their way of life. And while they tend to be a little better off, wealthy families who are getting their kid music lessons as part of some vanity project along with their 75 other activities usually don't do well either. I once made a video about those. Just to clarify, not a teacher, but for several years I worked in a residential facility for teen boys severe behavioral issues, that is sexually acting out, anger/aggression, assault, etc. These kids had essentially been rejected by every other facility, treatment center, community programming, and even some of their own families. Sure, there were a few who were just evil down to the bone, but the vast majority had issues exemplified by poor parenting. Anyway, we had one client in particular who was a schoolyard bully, or thug. At 18 years old he was 5 minutes and 11 seconds, and weighed 230 pounds easy. He had been placed for such offender behaviors which made it kind of intimidating for a petite, 5 feet 2 inches female staff member like myself. Obviously I didn't let this show. Miraculously this kid had successfully completed programming and was nearing discharge, which meant a lot of planning for a smooth transition. I sat in on his phone call to his mother to discuss his pickup the following week. He was going home. The phone call had to be kept on speaker for observation, and it was during this time that my heart crumbled for this kid, now legally considered an adult. He was anything but. He spoke to his mother in a manner I had never heard from him before, with the utmost respect and a tone that pleaded for acceptance and love. A child desperately seeking any amount of warmth and affection. And this woman absolutely shit on him. Her tone conveyed indifference and annoyance that she was being bothered by his phone call. She literally said to him, "What do you want? I got things to do." These are kids who only get to call home twice a week. The kid's face dropped. My heart dropped, and a little bit of anger boiled up inside me. That kid did discharge, but I have my doubts about his future. How can a kid improve and grow if he doesn't have a stable support system? We just give once a week counseling, have him make a few arts and crafts, sign some paperwork, and call it good. Did I mention how much money these facilities are raking in? Take all clients regardless, if we can meet their needs, and give them a stamp of approval, so the money keeps coming. Sorry, went off on a tangent. Bottom line is we have a horribly broken system for kids in need, and that kid's mother is a waste of space. My sister and I were probably these students. We were both smart and scored well on all tests, but we each had massive problems. In middle school we were weird and teased a lot. My sister would exhibit sudden mood swing and wouldn't take responsibility for anything negative. I couldn't turn in a homework assignment to save my life and was super hushed about my home life. In middle school our mom wouldn't come to our orchestra concerts, and the couple times she did she was too drunk to walk properly. In high school people took my built-up walls to be from dealing with rheumatoid arthritis. One evening I had to pick up my sister from JROTC after school, because when she finally got sold of our mom was too drunk to pick her up. My sister was having a meltdown. When I got there, I spoke to our JROTC instructors about the situation, about the drinking, and how I was the one working, and with a car, to keep things running in our family. They wanted to call CPS, but I begged them not to. We were almost 18, and the last thing I needed was that on my plate with a job and disability shortly before graduation. I told them that my sister would be back the next day, acting as though it had never happened. I was right, and had more than a few follow-ups with the instructors before I graduated about how faked up my home life was. but they helped to make sure I graduated, which I greatly appreciate. I taught a grade 9 class. I had one student that was consistently defiant and always trying to make me look bad. Never to the point where I had to get the principal involved. One morning he had picked up a stack of papers our class had been doing a project on. I asked him not to play with them and put them back on the desk. He looked at me then threw them on the floor. Obviously that required a visit to the principal, who emailed mom and dad and threatened suspension. The parents immediately requested an in-person interview with myself and the principal. The mom could not understand how her son deserved to be disciplined and went on to explain that it is my fault as the teacher that her son is unable to live up to the same expectations as the rest of the students. She specifically said that I had not done enough to earn her son's respect as a teacher and that I had to do a better job connecting with her son. I was in disbelief as to what I was hearing. It was when his dad spoke up that the light bulb went off for me. He said that him and his son used to butt heads all the time, but that they get along a lot better now that he just stepped back and dealt with his son exactly the way mom was suggesting. I realized then that this student could do no wrong in his mom's eyes, and that in order to make his marriage work the dad realized he had to take that stance as well. It was a bit sad to see, but definitely helped me to understand the student and make the year better for both of us. I was a secretary for a community college's wellness center many years ago. I was the one that was always greeted before teachers and saw most students every day. There was a student that was 19 and attacked one of his fellow students, and we called security, broke it up, and expelled him because he started it for a semester. He also started it because he said he made fun of his manliness, and he didn't do that. He just said there is more to being a man than muscles. The next day his dad came and asked, can I speak to a man about my son's expulsion? I don't like dealing with women. I said, I'm a man and we can't talk to you about the specifics about your son. If you wish to find out anything, please ask him. He then said, you ain't a man, I'll prove it. He then jumps over the counter and grabs my crotch and says, see. He gets red face and yells, you aren't a man, I can't be attracted to a man. Note, I'm very feminine looking and many people confuse me for a woman. He then starts to get very aggressive and throws a punch at me saying, if I'm a real man I would fight him. Luckily I'm very quick, dodged him, and jumped over the counter. One of the teachers we had who teaches karate came from the class he was teaching and subdued him before he got me. I called security and the nurses because I thought the teacher broke his arm, which he did. So that's how I found out they were alike. Elementary music here. You're going to read the same kind of story because we are all products of our parents. How you act and talk is how your children will act and talk. There is no way around it. This is not an across the board generality, but it is damn close. You can instantly sense from a child how supported or how ignored they are at home. Even though it can manifest differently, the root is still visible. Children are excellent mirrors of home and are also excellent mirrors of us as teachers. They need attention, they need love, they need boundaries, they need to know they did well, they need to know they did wrong, they need to know that you listen and care. Every parent-teacher conference week, when I meet the bulk of the parents, it always makes sense. The most meaningful encounter for me was a child who always doubted themselves whenever he played his trombone. Great player, hardworking, and very motivated. Been in contact over email and phone because the parents wanted to make sure everything was going as the child had reported. Then I meet mom and the doubt becomes clear. She was amazed that he had any talent because he didn't do much else except baseball. The older sister was the star of the household. The child was making a few points about relevant discussions and mom cut him off because the adults were talking. This was a smart family, well educated, gainfully employed and very wealthy. These kids have every advantage ahead of them. I spent more time teaching this child how to trust himself than teaching him the trombone. Thank God he is a great musician and we could focus on him. In Baltimore, had this kid named that thought he was the class clown and was always disruptive. I could tell he was acting out, but deep down just wanted to please the other kids and make them laugh. We were pretty sure he was a corner kid and sold drugs after school. He eventually was moved to a special class, where the disruptive corner kids like him were put, but really it just turned out to be a social experiment. Turns out, this kid had a dad who was locked away as he did hits for the local drug scene. The worst part was not that he was following in his dad's footsteps, but that his mom, Delonda, actively encouraged him to sell drugs so she could continue her lifestyle of doing nothing. Horrible person. Eventually, because he is a saint, one of the guys heading the specially made class actually adopted the kid and turned him into an upstanding individual. He must have known how he was deep down and grew fond of him. Last I heard, he was giving educated speeches on AIDS and was now fully pursuing education and behaving well. This mother was the absolute worst, and it was so obvious that he would be in jail or dead had this teacher not intervened and become his guardian. Sad what happens to some of these kids. Sheet. His 3 best friends ended up having it worse than him in the long run, since he was able to get out, a druggie, a rip and robber, and a kid that ended up a bully in an orphanage. Poor kids. I was a first grade classroom assistant when I was in grad school. It was a nice part-time job. I remember this one kid who would come in every day and just step over everyone else. Let me explain. The kids had to come in and put their reading group sheet in the basket before putting their bags on their reading group's peg set. This kid would swing his bag around his head. It didn't matter if he hit anyone or not. He didn't put his bag away like the others. He'd drop it where he felt like dropping it. He'd throw his paper at the little plastic baskets where they'd belong with the intention of knocking them over. I told him once, you shouldn't swing your bag. It's not nice to the others. Or you shouldn't knock over the basket and make the papers go flying. It's inconsiderate to everyone else. And he always had the same sort of reply, my daddy says it's my bag, so I can do what I want with it. Or it's my paper and I can put it where I want it to go, my daddy says. So, during the first parent-teacher night, I was there, just observing while everyone talked to the teacher. I saw the little sheet's dad, and then later I went out back to sneak a smoke break while everyone was still inside. This was in the late 90s, early 2000s. Things weren't always so tight about smoking. I saw a big SUV in the parking lot, parked diagonally across 3 spaces. As I saw people trickle out, I noticed the kid and his dad. It was his truck. It clicked in my head. I was the student. My 5th grade teacher was always riding me because I did not do any homework. She knew I was smart because I was the only student in the class who would get 100% on any of them. When it came to lessons, I would just open my desk and fiddle with things in it. Rip paper, pull erasers apart, draw on things, etc. The teacher seemed to resent me, and I was bullied by all but a few classmates. I was dressed dumpy, and I was overweight. When parent-teacher conferences came around, I think I saw recognition in her eyes. My mom was making excuses and saying home life was great and quiet, but my teacher kept reading my reactions. At the end of the year, my teacher proposed to hold me back in the 5th grade, and now I realize it was to look after me. We all did a gift exchange that Christmas, but the person that was assigned to me gave me a rock, just gray stone. My teacher gave me a gift in secret and punished the kid. Turned out to be my bully. I bet you are wondering what she saw in my mother. She saw a caustic household that just didn't consider me, and it was noisy and full of arguing all day, every day. There was no way to do homework there, and my issues were never addressed. It isn't like abuse or neglect, but the arguing was constant because of my mom's temper and prejudice against many things. My teacher wanted to give me another year of refuge from this while trying to bolster my confidence. Not a teacher, but I used to be a tar at an elementary school. Positive click here. This kid was the sweetest kid you could meet. Smart and funny too. I met his parents and they were super cool. All I could think of was, this kid should be the president. Always had a smile on his face, and no BS with his classmates. Super dope kid. My mum, kindergarten teacher, had him in 1st grade. He was chill then, and with me in 5th. This was a few years ago. I'm positive that he is doing just fine. I remember 2 other kids, 1st graders at the time, and they were both a bit of trouble. Nothing too crazy, they just needed a bit of self-discipline and motivation. Both these kids were struggling and gave the teacher a hard time. Both sets of parents had a particular look, all black skinny jeans, drive big trucks. One of these kids even had a pet tarantula. The two sets of parents were fairly young, couldn't be older than 30. They just seemed to have a don't give a duck about nothing attitude, which they passed down to their respective kids. The teacher actually looked forward to me coming in and working one-on-one with them, rainbow words and reading. I was one of the few that could get them to do their work, since I was the only guitar. A little guidance goes a long way. I also bribed them with a treat when they finished a set of rainbow words, vocab words, so that might have helped. Overall, just be good to a kid and they'll be good to you. Simple as that. I miss those kids. When I was student teaching, I had one of a set of twins. The twin I didn't have was the definition of successful, smart, funny, friendly, and athletically gifted. The twin I had was the opposite, and I never understood why until his failing grades brought mom in for a meeting. The student's handwriting was basically illegible. The first red flag was when she asked if she could write his assignments for him. It was clear she would have been doing more than just the writing, and we knew it, so her request was denied. We tried to instead get her to help him identify when work needed rewritten by him for legibility. After the handwriting issue, she then wanted to know why her son was denied opportunities for extra credit. My mentor teacher allowed students who had turned in all assignments on time to do some minor extra credit work to bolster their grade by about 1 point, for instance, B to B+. This mom wanted to know why her son, who had turned in few assignments, was not permitted to earn extra credit also. It was no casual inquiry either. She was committed to arguing the point, as though a few worksheets were the difference between the F and an A+. My mentor teacher ended up agreeing that he could come in before school to work on assignments, where we would review for legibility, and in return he could do the extra credit worksheets also. He ended up with the minimum to pass, but it was more down to generous grading than real improvement. I always wondered if the other twin succeeded, just to get away from smother mother. My girlfriend teaches elementary school, 2nd grade, in a poor area, and has quite a few of these stories. In particular, this year, 2 kids just randomly appeared in her class. She was supposed to have, say, 19 kids, but there were 21. The 2 kids weren't on her list and the direction knew nothing about them. The parents had just dropped them at school and left. They eventually got registered. I guess you'd call them half brothers? Basically, the father and mother each had 1 kid before they got together. The 2 kids were the same age. They had issue. One clearly needed medication, but was not taking it. My mom doesn't have money for them. The other was extremely reserved. Brilliant kid apparently, but introverted to the extreme. One day, one of the kids' backpack smelled like urine. They told a story of a cat being locked in the bathroom and cheating and pissing all over the place, including on the backpack. Not sure how or why that happened, but apparently the parents didn't think the backpack needed to be cleaned. The kids often told stories about how they had to stay alone at home for long periods with their younger sister, or would say how much they liked going to school because they actually get to have fun there. When my girlfriend met the parents, all her suspicions were confirmed. The mother was high as a kite and the father was fishy as hell and looked like a drug dealer. Few days ago, CPS came to school and took the kids away. On a less depressing note, she also tells a story that's kind of the reverse. She saw on the student list a name she recognized. It was the kid of a guy she went to college with. She was able to pick out which kid it was right away because the kid spoke and acted exactly like his father. This will get buried, but this is the best/worst story I have. I had this 6th grader who just made so many excuses. Nothing was her fault. The world was out to get her, etc. One week she turned in a piece of homework where the relevant, that is, graded, parts had clearly been erased and rewritten in much older handwriting. I wrote a kind of neutral email to her mom. Daisy's homework looks like it is in 2 different handwritings. Can we please meet? And heard nothing. I ran into the mom a couple of days later picking up something in the office and I asked her if we could talk about it. She flipped, saying, "These teachers, always accusing students of cheating. Have you considered that she has a tutor who writes for her when she's tired?" No. I'm perfectly fine with an adult writing her homework for her. She gets tired. This homework was 2 pages and the kid had a week to do it. The kid has no learning disabilities or IEP stuff. I say, fine. In the future, Daisy needs to do her own work. I'll remove this assignment from the grammar book entirely because there was confusion about who is supposed to do Daisy's work. 2 days later, Mom and Daisy ambush me in my classroom at 7:30 am. Mom angrily asks why Daisy got no credit for the infamous assignment. I explain again. Mom puts her hands on her daughter's shoulders and turns her to face me. Look at this teacher, Mom says. This woman does not care if you do work. She refuses to give you credit for the work you do. So in the future, you just do whatever you want on the homework she assigns you. The next year the girls' teachers basically got a restraining order against the mom for pulling the same sheet. The kicker? This woman is a principal of a nearby elementary school. I'm not a teacher, but I was the designated babysitter for a long time, until I put my foot down. We were poor. No getting around that. And our family friends were poor. Because they came from bars where poor people hang out, and jobs poor people occupy. Some are great. Some are white trash and great. Some were just yeah. This woman, we'll call her Evil Beach, was Mom's work friend. I'll have to admit I hate everyone at first, but I hated her at first. Still, people make a good point when they say you think everyone's sketchy, so I gave her a chance. She came to live with us for a while with her 4 kids from 11 to infant. I got to know her in passing and looked on the brighter side. The dad got painted as evil. I've no doubt he was, but it put a shade over the mom's problems. My brother and I let the kids hang out with us. My dad's gonna come take me. I don't wanna go standard crap. My brother very truthfully told him someone violent would be hard pressed to get past him. As time went on, the kids' behavior was terrible. All of them. Show the older girl a hint of affection and she wanted to marry you. All 3 of the non-infants acted out non-stop, except when I would sit them down to play a game, but Lord, it was like playing fetch with a rescue dog. They never tired. I was not the best person to be taking care of anyone for a time, so I let myself stay detached and just blamed the kids for acting out. Then as I changed diapers, that were a day past being changed, had a toddler slap my ass and come on to me, watched Eb getting drunk on broad daylight, and ignoring her kids I realized I didn't know her. I sat down with Eb and poured her a drink and got to know her. I will spare the details, but I've only met one more horrible woman in person. I even count her above my evil elementary school teacher in terms of unadulterated, shouldn't be around kidsness. I thought I had met her. I met the face she puts on at first. I have no doubt those kids' teachers were in hell. They probably had no clue, because the mom was so good at blaming it on the dad. It took me a while to realize I was even somehow absent during every CPS visit. I like to run people's errands for a few bucks. Easy to arrange. I was not my best self at the time, and have a lot of regrets. I hope at least taking them out a few times and feeding them my poisonous cooking put a few decent memories in their heads, but I doubt it, based on my own childhood recollections and those of grown-up kids I've taken care of. Anyone dealing with children, if you feel like everyone is sketchy, it's because they are. You are totally justified in keeping a semi-unbiased watch on them in secret. They're probably the spawn of Satan. If a child is acting out, it's rarely, if ever, just a bad child. And if it helps lend any credentials to my story, being here, I've worked with kids in volunteer programs and reading groups and what have you. But if it's a non-mandatory educational event, the children there probably have half decent parentage, or it's a decent older sibling dropping them off. Not a teacher. Probably not even the right place to post this. Don't give me any praise or compliments. I wish those on the man I'm about to write about. I was in 9th grade, had kinda stumbled through junior high due to some very bizarre events. I'd scored really high on a test in 7th grade, got recognized by a very nice college, Johns Hopkins University, to take part in a study for exceptionally gifted students, and proceeded to do their testing, blah, blah, blah. Got pushed so hard by my parents that I ended up intentionally bombing classes and tests to get out of it. My 9th grade history teacher, Mr. L, recognized my talent and dogged me relentlessly throughout the year to finally live up to what he could see. I don't know how he did it, but he made me want to make him proud. He inspired me to get my shit in gear during a very horrible year for me personally. He spent so much extra time with me, before school, after school, whenever I felt like I needed an extra kick in the ass. Without him, I have no doubt in my mind that I'd be living in a van, down by the river. I'm very proud to call this man a mentor, a teacher, and later in life, a friend. To all the teachers who have made a difference in a student's life, thank you. To some of us, you have no clue that the attention from you has been literally the difference between life and death. We don't always spill the beans about what's going on in our lives, but many of you gave us exactly what we needed at exactly the right time in order for us to learn a life lesson or two. Again, thank you. I feel like I was one of the opposite kind of cases, where meeting my parents wouldn't make sense to the way I myself conducted my school life. See, my father was a teacher as I was growing up, then later a vice principal as I was in middle junior school/high, and then during my high school career, and to this day, he is still a principal, but at an entirely different district, a good 30 minutes away kind of thing. Mother? She was a brigadier general in the National Guard, and works in office management for an investment firm. Both were home every night. Both were very adamant about helping myself or my siblings study. They didn't really mind if we wanted to be alone or spend time with the family. It was very relaxed. Now that I'm writing this, perhaps it does make sense. Well, anyway, from about 3rd grade onward I realized all I'm good at and all I want to do, still to this day, hence me being here, is escape from reality into worlds of fiction regardless of the fantasy. So cue 3rd grade me sitting under basketball hoops and reading The Wheel of Time, low TR, Red Wall series, etc. I mean, I would escape so hard that when I was still acting out or being unruly after being grounded from going to friends' houses or going out to play, that my parents realized they had to keep grounding me. Nothing would stop my escapism. I didn't have the PlayStation anymore. No problem. I had my books. No novels. No problem. I could draw and play with boxes of Legos, etc. So much for me to escape into. In high school, however, my escapism started becoming more immaterial. I just wanted, and I'm still struggling with this almost need, to graze over knowledge. If something interested/s me, I read articles and pick people's brains. I gain more knowledge, but then I drop it. It's not what I want to do. I just want to know everything about everything without focusing on a single thing. So now cue high school me, and I'm starting to get into partying and doing woods parties. Imagine 14 to 18-year-olds working 20+ hours a week to pull together a couple months worth of cash for us to spend on booze and drugs, enough for 40+ of us and a bonfire, skating, climbing and hiking. The only constant? There's always a handheld game system and novel somewhere close by me. Well, I get into the swing of figuring out how to effectively pass and scrape by. However, I literally did the minimum. It got so bad, I had to come up with a whole credit in a single night before graduation. My school awarded 27 to 36 credits for graduation over all 4 years. I managed 26 easily doing nothing, and the last was a heavy caffeine-fueled night into a textbook and associated tests to prove I grasped the subject enough for the credit. Fuck, I keep doing it. I get off track a lot, so I get into this method of making all my teachers love me and connect with my work. Regardless of this relationship, I still only ever appeared for about 10 minutes out of every class. I'd wake up early, get ready for the day. I'm a guy who was into the emo hair thing, and then I'd sleep again for another 2 to 3 hours. I'd make it to my first period just in time to get a full report from my teacher of what I missed, what was due, and if there was anything pertinent to have been done that day in class, for instance a pop quiz. I'd do these things during lunch. Disclaimer, by the time most of what I'm describing is happening I'm in my senior year, have taken advanced placement classes, found them to be overbearingly stressful, and decided that I should drop all my core classes, math, science, English, history. I hated later high school history as I really have a hard time caring about American history, and decided to supplement my career with all sorts of random classes, every art class provided for. Instance, computer programming, finances, poetry, guitar, etc. So here I am, skating through by just showing up. touching base, doing the bare minimum, and getting blazed as balls before school. During classes I could easily show up to be accounted for, walk out and return to without missing anything pertinent, looking at your guitar, and then during my lunch break, I'd always show up to my last class or two of the day with either a bushel of apples and a sparkling sea idea, or a box of cereal, which I'd knife open along the face of like those mini boxes you can camp with, and half gallon of milk. Munches used to hit 3 chipotle burritos in 20 minutes hard. My habit of not showing up got so aggravating for the administration, not so much my teachers, they loved me, and were just a little disappointed, that the lead administrator personally came to our school just to talk to me, and let me know that they, administration, had collectively decided there was no point in continuing to attempt to contact my parents when I was late or just absent. They couldn't find a plausible way to punish me that my teachers agreed with. Once again, I still provided what needed to be done, minus homework, if at a minimum, and still tested rather well. I literally scraped by with limited knowledge garnered in collective passings of hey that's neat, let's spend an hour looking it up, and used it to test well. So here I am, face to face, and his exact words are we no longer care if you even show up, you can do whatever you want. No more calling your family. No more calling you into the office. We are done. I considered it a win. I proved, or at least at the time I thought so. I'm starting to reevaluate my entire functionality as an adult, that just by being myself I could in fact force their system to work with / for me without conforming to its rules. I mean, even in all the art classes I took, the teacher, whom was like my second counselor, and at times defending guardian during scrutiny from the administration early on, would say things like I'm off to it, will you turn in something related to this project, so I can give you D. I'd begrudgingly fork over a few hours of work on my interpretation of the project, which occasionally she would either laugh at and love, or despise for my liberties with. One of my favorite English teachers passed me with a D, because she knew I kept a secret book of poetry and short stories I would write and supplement with drawings. She just requested that I turn the book into her for her review 2 weeks before that school year ended. I got it back 2 years later before I graduated. She held on to it that whole time for me. I still have it. I love that stupid blue book. They all worked around me. They were all concerned with my mental and emotional health, just as much as my family. They all tried every day. It was my own defiance that was out of place. I just wanted to be myself. And honestly, I'm paying for it. I'm not good at anything. I can do pretty much anything to a certain point, and I'm good at connecting concepts and rationalizing correct or better methods to make things work. However, I'm not actually good or interested in anything. You can't be a professional escapist. It literally gets you nowhere. I don't get why I couldn't have been more like my parents. They're pretty daydreamy too, but they both work hard. Even if they hate something or can't understand it. I myself, I just switched to a new topic that I'm curious about. I fully plan to get back to things all the time, to finish projects. But then I realize my goal or idea of what it was changes. I hate it. So I hoard it away as a memory of a time I tried. It's frustrating. But if you'd met my parents or my teachers, you'd seriously wonder why I acted the way I do. Edit, some spelling/grammar errors. This isn't a particularly good story, but I taught piano to one of the brattiest children I've ever seen. She was 9 years old and just a nightmare. I'll admit, I'm not good at teaching children, and I was just doing this as a part-time job because it was offered to me. But I'm not the first teacher she went through. She never followed instructions, didn't practice very much, and just in general had no idea what she was doing. Usually, the way the lesson would go is, she would play a piece, I would suggest things to do differently, and then we would work on a section of it until she got the hang of it. At least, that's what would happen with a normal student. Instead, she would play a piece, I would ask her to do it differently, and she would hammer it out the exact same way 10 more times. This is to say nothing of her actual attitude. I can deal with a weak student, just give them music that is more within their ability, or which plays to their strengths. She refused to try any new music I gave her, and only wanted to play the songs that her friends were playing. This involved her trying to move up a grade to match her friends, but she was already into advanced a grade for her ability. She was also very disrespectful, and at one point used foul language around me, something I don't tolerate in children. If she didn't want to do something, she just wouldn't do anything, wasting time, and, her parents, money. At one point, I had convinced my boss that it wasn't working out, and that she should assign another teacher to this student. My boss assigned a new hire as a tryout. The first thing we saw happen in their first lesson together was the new teacher running to the supply room to grab the book for the next grade. She was fired the next week. That's when I got back to teaching her again, but now she was firmly convinced she was in the next grade and didn't bring any of her old books. She struggled through one song, never improving, never listening, never practicing. Eventually I went on vacation, and she got a supply teacher, whom she claimed to love, but he was only temporary. She quit lessons after he had had enough, and after I refused to take her back. The twist: I had been told by my boss to go easy on her because her mother had died of cancer the previous year. Her father was a wealthy older gentleman, perhaps in his 50s, who let her do whatever she wanted, especially since the death. I don't even think he batted an eye when I told her she had been swearing at me. I exchanged stories with other teachers at that school, and they had similar experiences. Not a teacher, and never met the parents, but that second bit was part of the clique. Worked at a summer camp that ran for 8 weeks, 6 weeks with 2-week sessions of age 8 to 16, 1 junior week of 6 to 8, and 1 teen week of 13 to 16. Most kids would stay 1 2-week session. At about 12 years old, some would stay for 2 back to back. At 14 to 16, a couple would stay for 3 sessions, like 4 kids in the entire camp out of 110. And most of the time, the parents would pick their kid up for the day between sessions, although a few would stay. First session, this 8-year-old kid was clearly not ready to be at summer camp, antisocial, not wanting to participate in activities, wouldn't eat vegetables, his shirt's constantly crusted with food. And then at the end of the 2 weeks, I see him with activities laundry bag, which means he was staying for another session. A bit weird for that age, but not a huge deal. Then I realize he's there at dinner on Saturday night, which means his parents didn't come see him. And then this happens again at the end of the second session. And then again at the end of the third. This 8-year-old kid went 7 weeks without seeing his parents at a camp he clearly didn't want to be at. Lost a lot of respect for the parents and for the camp that day, realized the new owners cared more about money than the well-being of the kids. Oh my god. First of all, good question. While I was teaching overseas, I had a boy in grade 4 with all kinds of ADHD. He would shout and laugh in class at everything, couldn't produce an intelligible response to most questions, finished lunch with food, and drool all over his face, and wanted to raise his hand for every question I asked. He once backhanded me across the face as a joke when I came to school sleepy, missed my coffee that day. Not wanting to damage his confidence, I called on him often in class, and never said you're wrong or no, that's no good, anything like that. One day at the supermarket, he spotted me and started making a scene. I just want to escape, but I walked over and said hello to calm his outburst. He grabbed my hand and dragged me over to his parents to introduce me, and they were really pissed off at me for some reason. First of all, they both looked like they had just been hit by a bus and haven't slept in 30 years on top of that, and they gave me the evil eye when I introduced myself. Then they started shouting at the kid. I apologized and left. Now that I tutor in Canada again, I meet lots of students with problems. Maybe born with a drug addiction and their head is 2 sizes too small, and in almost every case, the parents are faked. I really wonder about the chicken and the egg. Are the students faked because their parents suck? Or do the parents suck because they've given up? By the way, while I was in the public school system, I estimated that about 3 or 4 of 100 students have very serious developmental problems, which was a little different depending on the school. Really makes me want to adopt a healthy baby instead of rolling the dice. I teach children with autism. Not just a little autism, but severe autism. I have what my school district considers a low functioning class. I also am apparently really good with negative behaviors. I tend to get the students that other people can't handle. I love the naughty monkeys. I can't help it. And where I work, the reward for good work. More work. A couple of years ago, there was this kid who was about to come to me from the grade below. He was the most severely autistic, but not low IQ, or any other comorbid disease you see with autism, kid that I have seen in our school district in a long time. He was nonverbal, had violent sensory seeking behaviors, injuring people and sending them to the doctor at age 4, and still in a diaper. But he was making some great progress. It didn't make sense to me, because I knew that the classroom next door had, like, 14 kids, not enough staff, and the kids are only there for 4 hours, and that includes breakfast and lunch. Then I met the parents. Dedicated, hardworking, willing to try anything, having high expectations for their son and anyone who works with him. It was awesome. I wish all of my parents were a quarter of the parents these people are. The older brother is, seemingly, a happy, well-adjusted, bright boy who loves his brother without feeling responsible for him, and also without feeling like he has to make exceptions or excuses for his brother's behavior, nor accept unacceptable behavior from him. They take him everywhere they go. He is involved in after-school sports, extended family activities and gatherings. Their life doesn't stop, and their world doesn't drastically change for him. Because, let's face it, the world isn't going to change for him. He is doing great. I have had him in my classroom now for a couple of years, and he is no longer in a diaper, is talking, and making great educational and social gains. I work with a great team of people, don't get me wrong, from an awesome occupational therapist and knowledgeable and helpful school psychologist, not to mention my team of teachers, but these parents truly set the bar. His progress made more and more sense the more family members that I met. Mom, dad, brother, grandma, aunt. Seriously, I wish all my students had even one family member like this. I really believe that quality of life, enjoying life, being able to relax, being healthy enough to enjoy the things that you like to do, etc. Coping skills and independence are so important for the population of kids I teach, and this family is making sure that their kid gets that. It's inspiring. I would work 10 times harder for whatever they needed, because I know the skills are being reinforced at home, and won't be lost as soon as he is no longer in my classroom, which I see all the time, and it is heartbreaking, but that is a whole different opera. TLDR, child with autism, very severe, making great progress. Didn't make sense until I met the family. Not a teacher, but an observation I had about my nephew. My brother-in-law and his wife have made the focal point of their lives the pursuit of money. They've moved themselves and their 2 kids across the country several times in the last 5 years in pursuit of more money. Whichever one of them makes the most gets to make the decisions in the house. Tends to change depending on who has gotten a new promotion. They don't take care of their belongings and just replace whatever gets broken. Brother-in-law has had so many DUIs and totaled so many cars that I'm amazed he still has a license. They often give us their kids' old things without us asking for them at all, just kind of like, here, take our trash, and the things they give us are in such destroyed condition that I would be embarrassed to give them to someone else. But because we don't make as much money as them, they must figure we'd be grateful for the handouts. They have said in the past that if we weren't related, they would not socialize with us because we're not in the same financial status as them. So their kids are 11 now, and for quite some time my husband and I have noted them adopting similar behaviors to their parents. Very entitled and disrespectful towards people's things. One of the more recent visits we've had with them, I lost track of how many times my nephew kept saying, "I'll do X if you give me money," or "Would you pay me to help grandma in the kitchen?" to pretty much anyone. For Christmas, I gave him some Pokemon cards and a plush, and his thank you card said, "I really like my gifts because they make my friends jealous." I asked his mom about it, and she was all, "Oh, that's what he wanted to put in there. There was nothing I could do to stop him." But every time I talk to the parents, it's just clear where this behavior is learned from. Not a teacher, but I've worked in an after-school program and been a TAR for the past 6 years. Anyways, there's a sibling pair, older girl/younger boy, who are always very odd. I had only ever had the girl in my class and thought she was a little odd, but nothing too repulsive. However, when I got her brother in my class this year, I realized that it's not just her. The whole family is a nutcase. The little boy tries to get away with anything, lies to everyone about why he is being punished, people hurting him, and also is a compulsive liar to friends, and is very disrespectful to not only teachers, but also other students. As you can probably guess, he gets picked on a lot. Normally, I'd feel bad, but this kid is a faking terror to everyone. If the kids are playing a game that he's not involved in, he'll run through it and start yelling because they're not playing by his rules. Well, fast forward a couple days into school and his mother comes to pick him up. Where I work, the parents are given a number to enter into a computer system to check out their children. The mother straight up refused to come in the door, and even does to this day, to check out, because germs might get on her shoes and she doesn't think the rules should apply just for me. And then the father comes in. This kid starts hamming it up about these kids. Pick on me, blah blah blah, he pushed me into a pole. My head has been hurting since I got here. All lies. The father starts babying this 8-year-old, telling him, oh honey, I'm so sorry, and tells us that it's been an ongoing issue. And now I know. This kid whines and cries to everyone because he knows daddy will take up for him and feel sorry for him. Extra crazy side note, he told me I'm not allowed to have gum, junk food, jello, or hot dogs because my mom says they have animal bones in them and that's gross. So far, I've fed him Doritos, hot dogs, jello, and potato chips for snack. On the flip side, why most of my teachers understood me better after the first parent-teacher conference, and how looking back on this made me a better adult. I was diagnosed as AD, and I genuinely struggled with my work. It all became apparent by the time I was repeating the 4th grade. However, I was being described as bright, creative, and stuff like that. I didn't necessarily have behavioral issues, but I had a very hard time making friends as I was pretty impulsive. At home, I was left alone a lot, left to my own devices, which caused me to be in trouble quite a bit, as I was young and just figuring it out. Both of my sisters were kind of adult teenagers, they both dropped out and had jobs, and my mom was just trying to keep up with it all. Work, sleep, work, sleep. I didn't fit in at school, I didn't fit in at home. So, comes the first parent/teacher meet and greet. My mom is, usually, a little late, pretty uninformed, but a kind and polite, well-spoken woman. As the years went by, I started to notice, after this meeting, my teachers would have a more gentle and considerate approach with me. I also started seeing the guidance counselor around this time of year, regularly. So it became a regular thing, and in realizing all of this, I have become more self-aware, and definitely more self-reliant. I teach psychology at a small community college in Massachusetts. I had a student of sorts that was referred to me by a college buddy. My buddy called the student special but troubled. He was a complete jerk, totally self-absorbed, and always lashing out. However, he was very intelligent, and picked up on our material very quickly. I would have one-on-ones with the kid and he would amaze me by how quickly he was learning. I never met his parents. His mother had died some years back, and the father was either not around, or the kid had cut the father out of his life. I asked him about his parents once. He told me his father was abusive and his mother had drug issues. That is when it really came together for me. The young man had so much intelligence, but was seriously damaged by his upbringing. I really think he started to turn things around as he clearly grew emotionally from the time I met him till the time he left. Last I heard he was heading out to California. I think he had a girlfriend out there or something. My college buddy was not real happy the kid left though. Apparently the kid solved some math problem my buddy had posted outside his classroom. My friend was hoping to work with the young man, but I guess it didn't work out. So not a teacher, nor is this story related to a teacher. It's about me as my mill. So my husband and I started dating when I was 16, and I was batshit crazy. Like call him 60 times in an hour crazy. Anyway, fast forward to 19-year-old me. I have some OCD issues such as, if I'll get an A let the coin be heads. I also can't handle tests without throwing up, and being a complete wreck all the time. I always had self-confidence issues and I wasn't smart enough issues. Fast forward to 21-year-old me getting married. I gave the family 24 days notice, which threw everyone off. Anyway, my mill and my mother decided to work together on the after party. My mill never really dealt with my mom, so my mother-in-law was getting 10 calls a day each on her house phone and cell phone. Dealing with my mom crying all the time about how much she's abused by my grandparents she's not. And a lot of other bullshit such as I wish my parents would just fucking die. Yeah. On my wedding day my mill straight up told me, I get it now. I get why you are the way you are and think you turned out great. Long story short, my mill understands me and we are closer than my mother and myself. But then again, it came to light recently my mother is doing crack, so yeah.